Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if abused son of Hippolyta Justice League. Before I start, please support for more amazing content and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by You Will Not Find Me and link in description and support writer. Let's start the video. The Justice League searched around the apartment of Felix Faust, searching for any lead that might tell them what he was planning to do with the artifacts he was forcing them to collect. Hera picked up a book and searched through it before angrily flinging it against the wall in frustration. The other members turned to her at the sound. This is pointless. We haven't found anything useful in here and we're running out of time. Diana didn't want to agree with the other hero, but she knew that Hawkgirl had a point. They had found nothing since their search began, and the clock was ticking against them. If they didn't do anything soon, then all of Themyscira could be doomed. Feeling as if her last options had been exhausted, she spoke up. There is one person who might be able to help us, she said, drawing the attention of her teammates. Who? Asked Batman in his gruff monotone. My brother. Your brother? Exclaimed Flash as the rest of the Justice League stared in curiosity. I thought you were an only child, said Superman. I never said that. I am the second child of my mother. He was the first. And why have you never mentioned this brother of yours to us before? Demanded Batman. Because it is not something that I enjoy discussing. Themyscira is an island full of nothing but women who hate men, and my brother was a son of Hades, conceived by my mother when the death god tricked her. My people never were kind to his gender at the best of times, and his circumstances did not leave him with much leeway amongst my sisters. Diana's eyes almost watered talking about the tragic tale of the Amazon's prodigal son. And your mother just let it happen? Asked Superman, expecting a denial from his teammate. Unfortunately, with the death god trapped in the underworld and no one to vent her frustrations on, her bitterness and hatred of Hades fell onto my brother. I remember the first time he ever came back from sword training, he was missing an arm from a sword strike that Egeria dealt him. The entire league's eyes widened to near circles. To hear that anyone could be so cruel was shocking, let alone to hear that such cruelty had been dealt by a resident of an island of peaceful Amazons. I'm guessing it didn't end well for him, Batman said. He had turned away from Wonder Woman to look over a series of books piled high on a stood, but one could still sense a morbid interest in his tone. No. Diana muttered, her face transforming to one of melancholy before becoming a small but sad smile. He hid it well from me though, he tried not to let me see what my sisters were doing to him. That day when he walked through the door and I greeted him, he just smiled at me and told me that it had fallen off and run away from him. I was young enough to believe such things then. After that he let me ride on his shoulders around the gardens, though I expect he had more than a few broken bones, before he set me down for a nap, and that's as much as I remember. The next morning he was fine. His arm had even regrown itself. Diana said, tears of both sorrow and joy gathering in her eyes as she recalled those peaceful days with her brother before she was old enough to understand the horror of what her sisters, who loved and adored her, were doing to him. You said he was at your home, wouldn't he be turned to stone too? What's the point in asking him? Asked Jon Stewart. If he had been at Themyscira you would be right. Diana shook her head a negative. But a little over 15 years ago, brother finally lost his mind. Truthfully it is a wonder it did not happen sooner, suffering as he had for all those years at the hands of those who were supposed to love him, and watching his sister receive the treatment he was just as entitled to eventually became too much for his mind to handle. Diana had moved over to an old armchair in the center of the room, one of the few places clear of the massive mystic tomes, in order to sit. It appeared that speaking of her family was a painful process. I wonder if he would have lost himself so totally had it not been for my own ignorance. After all, I am responsible for his descent into madness. Superman placed his hand on her shoulder. I'm sure that it wasn't your fault. Diana wrenched herself from his grasp, leaping from the chair and rounding on the Man of Steel. It was all my fault. On that day 15 years ago, it was my brother's day of anointment, the day where he was meant to be recognized as the legitimate heir to the throne of Themyscira and named its ruler should anything happen to my mother. It was meant to be a day of great joy for the both of us. A day that by tradition no Amazon could ruin for him, well, no Amazon save two. My mother declared that I would lead Themyscira if anything were to happen to her as queen when it was his by right. She stole his birthright right out from under him, and the worst part was, I accepted. I jumped and squealed and postured as my sisters laughed at my brother's humiliation, passed over for a child 6 years his junior, and still considered a child by our people. His own status suspended until he could perform a task fitting of legend. He went insane and tried to pry open the gates of Hades with his own 2 hands, a legendary feat, one could suppose. He actually almost succeeded. Hades's armies was beginning to spill through the doors, ready to once again savage the world before my mother stopped him. The god sentenced him to an eternity imprisoned in isolation for his attempt. So where is he? asked Batman, already pulling out a device, its purpose something Diana could not even begin to guess. His prison was meant to be inaccessible, remote and far from civilization. The gods decided to place it in the heart of Mount Etna, surrounded by the dangers that come with an active volcano. The League sat in Wonder Woman's invisible jet, flying over the Terrenian towards their destination. Diana was tapping her feet and fidgeting in nervousness at the thought of seeing her brother again. He had cursed her and every Amazon on the island the last time she had seen him, and that was after her mother had quite literally stabbed him in the back to stop his plan to free his father. Setting the autopilot so that she no longer had to fly them herself, she turned to her team. "My friends, before we arrive, I need to go over some things about my brother." The team nodded, understanding her. "First of all, Hawkgirl, you must stay here." "What? Why?" she demanded loudly, while the others looked expectantly at Diana. "I do not mean to offend you, my friend," the Amazon said, making placating gestures in an attempt to calm the woman. "It is just that my brother has not had many good experiences with women other than me. If he sees you before we get his help, he might rush and try to kill you." Shira twirled her mace and smacked it against her hand. "Bring it on," she said, confident that she could best Diana's kin. "Hawkgirl, this isn't about fighting, we need to find out what he knows and see if it can help us against Faust," said Batman, his eyes narrowing at the female hero. Hawkgirl sat down and grumbled out something that could be loosely translated to acceptance. "Second," Diana continued. "Do not mention that this is aiding Themyscira. My brother hates our home more than anything on this planet, and finding out that we are doing this to help them will make him more likely to throw Faust a feast than help us defeat him." They all nodded. "If he asks why we have come, tell him that Faust is terrorizing some other city. Lastly, do not stare at his eyes for more than 10 seconds or he will know in what ways we are deceiving him." Diana offered no explanation as to why they should not stare, but they all agreed nonetheless. The jet touched down just outside of the abandoned city. Diana exited with the rest of the League minus Hawkgirl. "Our, which houses only one prisoner, allow entrance to the Princess of the Amazons," Diana called out to empty air. The groaning sound echoed off of unseen walls, and a door opened in front of them. Just inside was a group of Amazons who were standing guard in front of another door. "Princess Diana, what brings you to this forsaken place?" asked one of the guards. As the rest of the League walked in behind her, the guards rushed forwards and pointed their swords and spears at the male members. "Who are you? What are you doing here with our princess?" demanded one of the guards. Her weapon pointed against Superman's throat. "Be calm, sisters. These are allies," Diana said, placing her hands on one of the spears, lowering it from John's neck. "My princess, what horror has come to our people that has made us turn to these men for allies?" "The worst kind, sister, conquest by other men," the warriors of Paradise Island gasped. "Why are you here then, my princess?" "To gather our remaining forces for a counterattack." "A wise move." "No, a counterattack would simply fall victim to the Gorgon's gaze that our enemy has harnessed. I require entrance to speak with my brother, to consult on how we might overcome this enemy." "That may prove impossible, princess." The guard seemed torn between regret and satisfaction. "Soon after we moved him here, the prisoner succumbed fully to his madness. He has been rambling nonsense ever since we brought him here 15 years ago." Diana nearly collapsed in shock, but kept up her calm and stoic visage in front of her sisters. She could cry for her lost brother later. "I will still need to see him, let me into the cell, if trouble occurs, send in my compatriots." "But Diana," said Superman. "You said we would ask him together." He was clearly worried, that much Diana could tell just from his voice. "I know, but from what my sister just told me, I think it would be best if I spoke to him alone for now." Batman gave her a careful nod. "All right, call us if anything happens." The gate slowly opened and Diana walked confidently in. As the gate slammed shut behind her, she moved farther into the prison and towards her target. It wasn't long before she began to hear haunting notes floating along the air. 99 dead Amazons on the wall, 99 dead Amazons, you take one down, rip it to shreds. 98 dead Amazons on the wall. The song continued as she walks, and despite its cruel theme, she can only wonder where he learned it. The song was not native to the Amazons, so he could not have learned it from the guards. It was unlikely that he had come up with it himself, so where had he heard it? Her thoughts were interrupted as more of the song's disturbing words floating inside her head as she walked towards what could well be her end. A part of her considered the irony of that. What an ironic way to end this life, she thought to herself. After all the villains I defeated, I am killed by the brother who loved me most of all. As she came to the last door, which kept her brother in his cage, the song reached its final part. 2 living Amazons on the wall, 2 living Amazons, oh look, its dear sister and lovely mother, what should I do?" The song cut off and insane laughter rang through the air. A chill ran up Diana's spine as she heard it. She had met Batman's archenemy. The Joker and his insane laughter seemed tame in comparison to the unhinged cackles that emanated from the room in front of her. Kill sister, kill Mother Olok, no more dead Amazons on the wall. Better go kill some more. Taking a deep breath and summoning all of her courage, she pushed open the door to the prison and waited for the strike that she knew would come. Except the strike never came. Turning her head back to the place where he was, she gasped to see what had become of the boy she had once had such fun playing with. His skin, once a healthy tan that would seem to shine in the sun, had withered to a sickly white with its absence. His body was gaunt, skin stretched over bone with almost no flesh to fill it out. His eyes were dull and empty as his mouth moved silently, the song he had been singing over until the next time his broken mind demanded that he repeat the dreadful tune. "Brother," Diana cried, rushing over to the older man and picking him up as if he were light as a toothpick. She carried him to the cot that lay in the far corner of the room and laid him down. She rushed around the room, hoping to find any kind of sustenance that would ensure her brother's continued survival. Part of her knew that as long as he was in the tower he would never die, but seeing him as he was had drowned all logic that she might have had and set her on the singular mission of helping her brother. She finally found some stale bread and water in a jug and brought both over to him. Opening his mouth for him in his weakened state, she gently fed him the bread and made him drink the water. As soon as the pieces of the stale loaf and old water disappeared down his throat, his body began to fill out. His bony physique seemed to grow and increase in seconds until he was once again the picture of the peak human form. Color flowed back into his skin, returning to its healthy glow even in the dimly lit room. It took no more than seconds upon seeing his transformation for Diana to come to a near horrifying conclusion. With the combination of his Amazonian and godly body, as well as the magic of the tower and the food her brother would have had to have deprived himself of food for weeks in order to reduce himself to such a state. But what was his goal? She wondered. What could his aim have been that required such fasting? A thought struck her so suddenly that it made her almost dizzy with grief. Had her brother, the man who had lived through countless horrors in his life and remained for the most part the same, tried to kill himself? Her mind could not process the thought that the man she respected and cared for more than any other in her life would stoop to such ideas as suicide. But still. Her mind betrayed her and began to wonder, could this place, this isolation that never ended in the darkness that was never broken save for whatever torment the guards chose to inflict on him next, have been what truly broke his spirit? More than anything else, her brother had always been someone who believed that life always had something to offer to keep one alive. To think, no, to even consider that he himself had given up on the land of the living, made the world in which she lived in a little darker, the birds no longer chirped so happily, the flowers no longer looked as beautiful, and everything she could remember since he had told her those words seemed a little more false in its majesty and wonder. The man's eyes fluttered open on his bed and he was greeted with the sight of Diana, the Wonder Woman, princess and future queen of the Amazons, and his younger sister. He bolted up and lunged at the woman, locking her arms in a hold that not even she could break and forcing her into the ground on a single smooth move. "Give me one good reason why I shouldn't kill you right now, thief," he spat. Thief. It was heartbreaking for Diana to hear her own blood refer to her with such contempt and with such a horrid title. But she could not blame him. When Hippolyta had first announced that Diana would succeed the throne and not her brother, Diana had been more than happy to jump up and accept her new position without delay, not thinking of the consequences or caring for the implications of her words. From that fateful day onwards she had held true to the belief that it was her fault for her brother's fall. That seeing the girl whom he had always looked out for and cared for amongst a sea of women who despised him so willingly take his birthright. To accept without any kind of questioning or confusion, had broken him. Shattered whatever fragile spirit he had and driven him to undergo such an insane idea as to attempt to open the gates of Tartarus. Staring down at the girl, now woman in the dirt, brought painful memories to his torn and broken mind. Images of happy days and peaceful nights raged through him and he recoiled in his haste to cease injuring the one person he still cared for. Diana saw the battle in her older brother's eyes, sanity breaking through for just seconds before the madness closed in and swallowed it whole. "You," he sputtered in rage and fury. "You stole everything from me. My sisters, my mother, my birthright. If you had never been born, I would be the one our sisters loved." The sad thing was that Diana agreed with him slightly. She had heard later on of the stories of his treatment when he was a child. But she also knew that it had gotten significantly worse when she had been gifted to their mother. Now here he was. The bravest, noblest and strongest person she had ever known, reduced to a gibbering mess in the confines of his own madness and solitude. "I know," she said. "And I know that there is nothing I can ever do to right the wrongs committed by our sisters." "Your sisters?" He cut her off. "They are your family as well," she replied and instantly knew that was the wrong thing to say. "They stopped being my sisters when they tried to feed me to the lions on your 9th birthday." Diana flinched. She still remembered that day. Some of the more zealous Amazons had hunted her brother down a few weeks before her birthday and kept him captive. They starved him and beat him in hopes of him dying, but he had not given in. Adamantly declaring that he would not die until he got to give his younger sister a birthday gift. So Diana's sisters had decided he would get his wish. On the day of her birthday, after retrieving a prize worthy of recognition for her mother and sisters to commemorate her growth and skill, Diana had been brought to the Colosseum to watch a tournament in her honor. When it was finally over, she was about to get up to leave as it had always been, only to see the two gates at opposite ends of the arena open. Out of one stumbled her brother, looking weary and tired. Out of the other stalked a group of hungry lions. Diana's eyes widened with horror as her sister cheered the lions on, shouting for their prince's death and yelling in disappointment as each lion failed in their pursuit and was felled by the young warrior. The fight had lasted for what seemed like years as the young Diana watched her brother strike the hungry felines down, wrestling them to the ground and choking them, using their own claws as weapons to slash and kill, taking dozens of wounds over the course of the battle as fatigue reached a height she had never seen in her sibling, and the well-rested but hungry beasts landed glancing blows with their claws or took their literal pounds of flesh from his exposed form. Looking back at that day, the fight could have lasted no more than an hour, 60 minutes before all of the lions lay dead or unconscious in the arena. Her brother had managed to defeat each and every animal that had been brought against him, and although he was panting with exhaustion and covered in claw marks that would undoubtedly scar, he was victorious. The girl had cheered her for her brother with so loudly that he had turned and smiled up at her, waving in an attempt to seem nonchalant, even as their sisters and mother looked on disappointedly at the lions. It seemed that more than just those responsible his kidnapping had hoped for the young prince's blood to be spilled. In the aftermath of the fight, Diana had had to plead with Althea for hours just to get her to attempt to heal the wounded prince, and even then it had been half-hearted and filled with sabotage. Her brother had shaken her off of him and stormed into the woods surrounding their city after the fourth time he had discovered her trying to cut him open. "Brother, please," she pleaded with him. "Don't call me that. Call me by my name." He snapped at her, his eyes still furious and burning. "You know I cannot. Mother decreed your name would never be spoken again after you left." He scoffed. "Why should I care about her rules? She's nothing more than a stone statue now." Diana's eyes widened then narrowed. How had he known? The light chuckle escaped from his mouth. "Yes, I know what has happened. Do you think that a mere mortal like Felix Faust could have gotten his hands on a Gorgon talisman, no matter how talented in the mystic arts?" The blood froze in Wonder Woman's veins. Was her brother working for his father? "So you know about the artifacts?" she asked, looking for any recognition to the words. Fortunately or unfortunately, depending how one could look at it, his eyes showed genuine confusion along with anger and insanity. "What artifacts?" "He just said he wanted to play a little trick on the Amazons, and I provided him the tools to do so." Diana took out the pictures she and the others had taken and placed them in front of her brother. His eyes shot open to the size of plates before he leveled a glare that could melt steel and freeze souls at the same time directly at her. "Have you delivered these artifacts to him yet?" he asked, completely serious as he stared at his younger sister. "No, we haven't, they are safe with me," she replied. "Good. Listen, Diana." The madness had completely fled his gaze now. It seemed that the threat these objects posed was enough to make even him serious. "These artifacts together make up the key to the gates of Hades. If you give them to Faust, I have no doubt that he will use them to return the armies of the Lord of the Dead to this world. I wish nothing but the worst on the inhabitants of that island, but the monsters that will rise from Tartarus at his command, they are too horrible, and they will not be stopped, not by anything." Diana nodded at him, now understanding the seriousness behind her brother's words. "Thank you, brother. I am very grateful for your help." She stood up and bowed before taking her leave and walking back towards the door. "Wait. Take me with you." "I'm sorry, I cannot." "Please. This place, not even our home, was this bad." "I am sorry, I cannot go against the will of the gods." Anger once again flared in his eyes, consuming all other emotions and making Wonder Woman flinch away at his harsh gaze. "Fine, go, leave me in this place. I cannot say I hope you will fail, but if nothing else I will deny you the knowledge of how to undo the curse of the Gorgon." "Brother," Diana yelled at him. "You cannot allow for them to stay like that." "Why not?" "Please, brother, for me." "That won't work, Diana." "Fine, if you would be so petty as to doom all of our sisters to an eternity of petrification, then your punishment might just be deserved." "Why is it petty? At least in their eternity of prison they won't be conscious to go mad from it all. I will come back and you will tell me how to save them." Diana left the room, walking down the hall and back towards the real world. Behind her, music began to start again. Except this time it was not the demented song about killing Amazons, but a smooth and slow humming. Tear welled in Diana's eyes as the notes floated to her ears. It was the song that he would always hum to her as a child. Furiously she wiped a tear from her eyes, trying in vain to stay angry with him, but she wondered. Was he truly being petty? She shook her head, he was attempting to soften her with his song. When they had been young children, whenever she was sad or tired, he would pull her into his arms, take her to her room, and hum that tune until she was asleep or no longer as sad as she had been. Unknowingly she began to hum the tune as well, even as she left the cell and headed back to her plane with her friends, she still hummed the tune much to the confusion of her team. Only the guards seemed to recognize the music, but their faces only showed mild contempt. "My princess." One of the guards addressed her as she approached, the rest of the group not far behind. That man walked up to her, interrupting her music with a somber look. "So what did you learn from him?" Diana sighed and turned back to the assembled group. "He gave Faust the amulet that allowed him to conquer Themyscira." The others almost gaped in surprise. "That little pile of shy." "Calm yourself, John Stewart, it is not what you think." Diana interrupted him. "He gave Faust that amulet with the intent of mischief, not conquest." "Does it matter why he gave Faust the amulet? The problem is getting it away from him and reversing its magic," said Batman, ever the logical one. "As much as it pains me, Your Highness, the man is right, we will need to find a way to nullify the curse of the Gorgon if we wish to defeat this man Faust." "I know, sister, but I fear this is a quest you cannot assist us with." "What? My princess, surely you would not forbid us the chance to avenge our homeland. You have another, more important task. With so many of our sisters incapacitated, my brother's prison is more vulnerable than ever before. As princess and acting queen until my mother returns to her throne, I charge you to watch over the prison of the Prince of Themyscira and ensure he does not offer aid to the invader Felix Faust." The guards were clearly unhappy to be stuck guarding a prison as others left to save their home, but by the decree of their ruler, they could not deny her orders. "Very well, sister. May you know swift victory in the battles to come. And you as well, sister." Diana and the Justice League walked out of the volcanic prison into her invisible jet. The hatch closed itself, and Diana quickly made the pre-flight checks to ensure that the vehicle had not been compromised. The plane lurched slightly as it rose from the volcanic depths moments before it sped into the air, soaring through the sky at speeds approaching Mach 3. "So how are we going to stop Faust?" asked Batman. "I thought you were going to find a solution." "I did," Diana said. "It took some negotiation, but I was eventually able to get the information I needed from my brother." "How'd you do that?" asked the Flash as he leaned against one of the seats. "And why didn't you tell them that?" "I needed them to stay where they were," Diana said. "As for how I got the information, this is how." She got up out of her chair and headed towards the rear of the craft. Pushing the button that led to a small storage compartment, the door slid open to reveal the Amazonian's older brother, laying peacefully against the wall and fiddling with something. "My friends. I would like you to meet my brother. The former prince of Themyscira and son of Hades." The man bowed slightly and stared at each member of the Justice League individually. After a few minutes of silence he spoke. "Why are you wearing your undergarments outside of your cloths?" Most of the League sputtered in indignation at the comment before they looked down to examine themselves. Diana almost gave a laugh, her brother had always known how to diffuse tense situations. Mostly in ways that would amuse her as a young girl. The Batman remained unfazed, he instead narrowed his eyes and stared at the newly liberated man. "So you plan to help us save Themyscira?" asked Batman. "No, I am here to save the world. If my father's armies are released they will bring about untold doom to the world and I will not allow that. After this is finished I will allow myself to enjoy the sport of smashing as many Amazonian statues as possible before we restore them." Diana leveled a glare at her older sibling, but it went unnoticed by the man as the lands of the Greek country came into view. With the plane's great speed, the journey from Mount Etna to Themyscira would take them no more than 10 minutes. Superman was the first to attempt some kind of courtesy to her brother. Holding out his hand he offered him a warm hello. Diana's brother seemed surprised and suspicious at the friendly gesture, but nonetheless took the Man of Steel's hand and shook it in greeting. A small smile graced his hard features and secretly Diana jumped for joy. She had not seen that smile for years and seeing it now warmed her heart and brought back wonderful memories to combat the dire feelings of panic at the thought of what was happening to her sisters. There was a rather tense silence that lasted for the remainder of the ride, thankfully with the great speeds the jet traveled at the journey lasted no more than 10 minutes. As the great island paradise of Themyscira appeared in front of them, though with its toppled houses and Amazonian statues resting everywhere, it did not convey its normal feeling of tranquility. "We have arrived at our destination, we will disembark shortly." "Wait," said Batman. "Before we leave, we need to know how you got him out of the prison." The rest of the League also turned to them both, awaiting an explanation. "Well, you see." Diana started. Flashback begins. Diana could hear the peaceful and beautiful humming flowing through the halls as she walked, and as she got farther and farther from her brother's prison, she could feel her heart tearing apart. Finally she couldn't take it anymore and rushed back into his room. Diana burst through the door, rushed over to her brother and latched her arms around his neck, letting out a seemingly endless flow of tears into his shoulder. She pleaded through her sobs for forgiveness as he held her and comforted her. Even half mad and trapped in a prison, it seemed he still held true to his memories and gingerly held the crying woman to his chest, offering her some comfort. Diana finally separated herself from his shoulder, wiping her eyes to clear the last of her tears. She stood up, followed momentarily by her brother, and walked over the end of the room opposite to the doors. She rested her hand silently against the wall and pushed, slowly but surely adding more and more of her impressive strength. Her pushing soon caused a section to fall out nearly noiselessly, easily big enough for him to climb out into the day. Her brother stared at the daylight flowing through the hole in the wall with wonder. He stretched his hand out and let it pass through the light as if it might hurt him. A grin broke out on his face and he began to laugh. Not the sick twisted laugh Diana had heard before, but the loud full happy laugh that she had loved as a child and still enjoyed hearing as a full-grown woman. Please listen brother, climb out and head towards the front of the prison, climb into my plane. The big black monster with large wings, and store yourself in the storage compartment at the back. Do not make a noise until I open the compartment. He nodded vigorously. Happy just to be free of the prison he had been confined to for the last 15 years. Diana, having completed her impromptu mission, then left the cell, humming her brother's tune, and led the League back into her jet. Flashback ends. Diana ended her story, leaving out some of the less relevant and more personal details. Batman looked slightly skeptical, but nonetheless accepting of the story when he saw that the prince was nodding along. His teammate had no reason to lie to him, so despite a small feeling in his gut he got every time he looked at Diana's brother, he allowed the two to move towards the exit of the craft. Batman placed his hands in front of the other League members. Keep a careful watch on them. On Diana. What are you talking about? She's our friend. Superman crossed his arms over his chest. She's too emotionally involved. This is her home, Batman. I think it's okay for her to be concerned. Flash piped in, nodding his head slightly as he thought about it. She letting him manipulate her. I don't trust him. Hawkgirl rolled her eyes. None of us trust him, he's here because he hates his daddy more than his mommy. It's the enemy of my enemy. As soon as this is over I bet you he tries to run. The group nodded to each other, with the exception of Superman and Flash, who seemed torn over the idea of betraying someone helping them, even if they were just doing it out of hate. The ramp lowered, and the entire Justice League and Diana's brother in a hooded cloak walked out into the destroyed landscape of the Amazonian city. Faust was sitting on a marble statue with Queen Hippolyta's statue sitting next to him, sword drawn and poised to strike at the man. Ah. He said, satisfaction evident on his face. You have brought me what I asked for. Diana brought out the artifacts, joined together to form the key. Faust was about to reach and take them when something odd struck him. How did you know how to put the pieces together? He asked, suddenly weary and glancing around. That does not matter, do as you promised, release the Amazons. Diana demanded. But of course. Faust raised the amulet and spoke in the language of magic. The stone statue gained color before it transformed into the living queen of the Amazons. She ran forward, carrying through with her attack and swiped at empty air. Seeing her mother in front of her, Diana flew forward and dropped the key, which floated to Faust's hands at the bidding of his magic. Diana? Asked Hippolyta looking at her daughter. Rest mother, everything will be alright. She whispered. No, you do not understand, the artifacts you have been retrieving are. I know mother. She said. So you did figure it out. Said Faust, breaking the mother-daughter moment as Diana helped her mother to her feet. Yes I did, and you will not succeed. Faust cackled at her words. Oh, won't I? Who is going to stop me when all of you are turned to stone? He raised the amulet and began to chant the incantation. Only for the amulet to disappear in a red flash as the flash appeared on the far side of the clearing. Looking for this? He asked jovially. Faust roared in anger as he summoned his magic to attack the Scarlet Speedster. Flash dodged quickly and runs away, handing the amulet secretly to Diana's brother who hid it in his robes. Meanwhile the Justice League had begun to fight the giant plant monster that Faust had summoned up to combat them. They were winning bit by bit as the evil wizard was pushed farther and farther from the gates of Tartarus's hiding place. Yelling once again in frustration, Faust unleashed a blast that threw everyone back. Teleporting forward, he grabbed Hippolyta by the wrist and moved them both to the gates of Tartarus. Faust neared the gates, moving closer and closer towards the key slot, all the while Hippolyta was trying to convince him to stop. Please, you have no idea what kind of terror you are about to unleash upon this world. I know exactly what I am doing. When I free Lord Hades's armies, he will reward me with ultimate knowledge. Whatever he has told you or promised you is a lie. He will kill you the second you are no longer useful to him. Silence. he yelled as he chained Hippolyta to a stone column and placed the key in the slot. The gears began to turn and the gates opened, revealing raging fires on the other side. The League and Diana's brother bounded down the stairs just in time to see a figure emerge from the shadows of the chamber, walking slowly towards the wall of fire that could be seen through the opening gates. He was tall and could be considered handsome, were it not for the evil and sadistic look on his face and the arrogant way in which he carried himself. Hades stood in the land of the living, awaiting the arrival of his long-entombed armies and ready to rule the world with an iron fist. Faust bowed deeply to him and spoke. "My master, your humble servant has returned." Hades looked down impassively towards the groveling man before looking past him towards the chained-up queen of the Amazons. "What is this? My queen returns to greet her lord and master upon his day of conquest." Hades moved in closer to Hippolyta and sealed his lip against hers, stealing a kiss. Just as it has always been." He purred sadistically. "Just like it was when we made our son, I wonder if you are as you were back then." "That is disgusting, father, please do not speak of that in my presence." The League tried to hide but were surprised when they found that they couldn't move a muscle. Diana looked to see black lines running across everyone on the League as her brother walked towards the death god. "Ah, my son, you have brought me a gift. You look well considering your imprisonment. How did you escape?" "My sister, of course, she was always so easy to fool, always seeing the best in people, a flaw I suffered from before my sisters showed me that all of humanity are nothing but mongrels." The prince squatted down, now eye to eye with his restrained mother. "Hello, mother." He crowed in a playful voice full of malice and evil. "It has been 15 years since you locked me away, are you happy to have your son return home?" "You are not my son and this is not your home anymore." The clicking noise came from his mouth, as if berating a child. "But you see, mother, this is my home, this place is where you brought me into the world. This is the place I lived, the place you tortured me for no other crime than my gender, the place I was meant to rule until you cruelly took that right away from me. With your every breath you prove that my decision was the right one." She spat at him, flinging a glob of spit when struck his cheek. Smiling slightly he wiped it off, looking down on his mother as one might look at a disobedient pet. "Brother?" Diana's voice echoed through the cave. "Yes, dear sister." "Why? Why would you do this? I helped you, I set you free, and you repay me by joining the Lord of the Dead." Faust had finally gathered his courage and decided to speak. "My lord. Not to interrupt but my payment is due." The Lord of the Dead looked at the sorcerer and thought for a moment. "Ah yes, ultimate knowledge." He stretched his hand forward. "Ultimately, the only knowledge you mortals will know is death." Faust screamed in agony as his body was consumed in flames. Hades let out a satisfied sigh. "Now that he is out of the way I can get started on conquering this world, ugh." Hades flew away from the sight. Diana had her hand out. She had managed to overcome the binding her brother had placed on her. Turning to her brother she struck him in the jaw, sending him flying across the cavern and smashing into the far wall. The Justice League rushed forward to engage the two villains as whatever magic that bound them dissipated. Batman and Hawkgirl tried to take down Diana's brother while the others attacked Hades. The man had managed to pull himself out of the wall he had been sent into only to dodge a batarang from Batman and a mace strike from Hawkgirl. He intercepted another strike from the winged woman, catching the mace with his bare hands. "Something you may not know about me," he said with twisted glee in his voice as he threw Hawkgirl by her mace, smashing her into Batman and sending them both towards Hades as he turned his attention to Diana and Hippolyta. "I am every bit as strong as my sister." The man picked up a sword that was on the ground, dropped by some fallen Amazon eons ago, and strode towards his mother and sister. Diana stepped in the way of her brother, trying to protect her mother from his wrath. "Stand down, brother, if you surrender now, I will be lenient," she said. Her brother's eyes widened before he let out a raging laugh. "Why should I stand down, little sister? You've never beaten me once in all of our practices together." Diana cursed in her mind. It was true. She had been trained her entire life to fight by her sisters, but as she had learned in her time in the world of man, no amount of training could prepare you for a real fight. Punches weren't pulled when a real fight broke out. Death was always a possibility, and that was something that she still did not have much experience with. Her brother on the other hand had lived his entire life in the shadow of the Valley of Death, a sword of Damocles over his head from birth. For him there was never any training, just live or die. He never had to let go of any inhibitions or restraint because he had never had or needed any before this. In fact, the young prince's efficient brutality in tournaments and fights in general was quite well known on Themyscira, but now Diana knew it was brutal fighting and lack of mercy and restraint had been the only thing keeping her brother alive up till this point. Those facts on their own made him a dangerous opponent, and even after all of his time locked away in his prison, Diana still did not know if she could defeat her sibling. He rushed forward, crossing swords with his sister as she tried to defend both her and her mother. Unfortunately, it was not long before she realized that she was losing ground quickly. Glancing blows and minor wounds were her victories, while large cuts and painful strikes showed just how much he had held back whenever the two had fought as children. Her sword flew from her hand as her brother disarmed her, pointing his sword at her throat. He raised his arm and was met with the ringing noise of steel meeting steel as the blow was intercepted by their mother. Hippolyta held the sword firmly and with lifetimes of experience against her oldest child. Oh, what a model mother, jumping at the chance to protect her little girl. I wonder, did you ever think to protect me like that, or did you hate me from the moment I was born? Hippolyta flinched slightly, and her son used that single instant of weakness to launch his attack. The two swapped sword strikes dozens of times, both of them evenly matched against each other as they fought. All the while, the fallen prince's smile grew, turning into an insane grin as her clashed once again with the woman who had raised him. Yes, yes, this is what I have wanted for so long. The chance to fight you, to defeat you, to kill you. Fight me, fight me, fight me. His sword moved in a blur, slashing and stabbing and cutting away at the Amazonian queen. When I tried to open the gates. You didn't even have the stomach to challenge me, did you? You didn't have the heart to look your son, your blood in the eye as you drove your sword through me. Instead you were a coward, you stabbed me through the back and threw me into that prison. You couldn't stand to see the child you failed every day. You wouldn't have been able to look in the mirror. He said, each word cutting into his mother sharper than the actual sword strikes. I tried so hard. He continued. I tried so hard to please you, to be the best Amazon there ever was. And every time you would turn me away, scold me, strike me, just because I was a reminder of him. Again his sword passed through her guard and sliced her side, dyeing her tunic with red. I did everything you ever asked of me. I trained until my bones were ground to dust. I fought until I could not even stand. I tried to make you see, I tried to make them all see that I was not my father, that I was not a demon child, but none of you wanted to see the truth, none of you wanted to see me as anything other than Hades' son. Hippolyta's sword fell from her hands, and her son dropped his in response. Her grabbed the collar of her robe and brought her close before smashing his head into hers. He pushed her back and was on her in less than a second, raining blows on her tired and beaten form. Diana would have come to her mother's aid, but she was too busy saving the lives of her teammates and battling against Hades and the armies that poured from the gates. The prince continued to beat his mother rapidly. Everything I ever did in my life, I did to make you proud, to try to make you see me for who I really was. Tell me how proud you are of me now, mother. He landed a blow to her face, sending her reeling and forcing her to the ground. Now he stood over her. Tell me. He said to her. Tell me. He screamed, finally letting every ounce of hatred, rage and pain out at once. Hippolyta sat up from her downed position, leaning on her arms as she stared up at her son. I hated you for so long. She said to him, her voice weak. But it was not like that in the beginning. When you were born I was tired and weak and in pain. But when I saw you for the first time, a little tuft of hair on your head and those adorable little green eyes staring at me. It was the happiest day of my life, you were perfect, perfect in every way, and I wondered if you could actually be the son of that monster. But as you got older, you looked so much like him, not the color of your hair or your eyes but everything else. I was so bitter, your father had tricked me and you were the result, and I couldn't help but see you as just more evidence that I had made a horrible mistake. Is that what I am to you? He asked. A mistake. An era that was to be destroyed, wiped away like some stain. No. She cried. She had no right in any sense of the word to refute what he had said, his description perfectly fit the way she had allowed him to be treated, but it was still what she felt deep in her heart. You obviously thought so. He yelled back at her. You let it happen, everything your people did to me and you just watched, you watched and laughed. They beat me, cut me, starved me, burned me, again and again and again. And when Diana was gifted to you it only ever got worse. Hippolyta stared at the ground, her eyes flowing with more and more tears the more her son spoke. I know there is nothing I can say or do that will ever make up for the horrors your sisters and I inflicted upon you, but you have to know that my keeping you, my birthing you, that was never a mistake. I did many horrible things to you but please you must know that I loved you. She said it. Those words that made her want to lay in a hole and die of despair. She had loved him, he was her child, her flesh and blood, and yet despite that she had allowed her bitterness and hatred of his father to bury that love deep under her hate. She had buried it so deep that she had not flinched at the sight of him armless and half dead after his first swordsmanship lesson, nor when he had almost died on his first hunting expedition, or when he had fallen ill as a babe and nearly been gone in her own arms as she glared at him. She had allowed the son she loved to suffer because she could not overcome her own grudges. Her child stared at her, unmoved. The funny thing is, he started, waiting until his mother was looking at him before continuing. So long ago I would have done anything to hear those words come from you, or anyone for that matter. But now all I feel is hollow, empty. Hippolyta let out a small and broken sob as he spoke. That part of me, the part that loves you, the part that cares about your opinions. He reached down and cupped his mother's chin, forcing her to meet his eyes. You killed him 15 years ago, right here, with a sword in his back and in pain in his heart. Now all that's left is me. I hope you're happy. He grabbed his mother's clothes, bringing her eye level with him. But this is digressing from my question. Are you proud, mother? Proud of what your son, your flesh and blood has become? Hippolyta looked around her daughter and her team laying scattered and defeated at Hades's feet, her own son standing over her, ready to end her life, and the world that she lived in about to come to ruin at the hands of her son's father. Yes. She said. I still am proud. Deep down I have always been proud of you. Everything you did, enduring what you had and still being who you were. That made some small part of me that wasn't consumed by that madness proud beyond words. When you won your first tournament, when you killed your first boar. Everything you've ever done makes me the prouder than you could possibly imagine. You were a wonderful Amazon and a good man. You never raised your hands against your sisters. Never sought revenge, in spite of everything. In that way you were better than me, better than any of us on Themyscira. Hippolyta stretched out her hand towards her son, hoping against all odds that he might forgive her and see reason. I am sorry for everything that happened to you, everything we did. But I am proud of you, I love you. Please, stop this madness and let us try to mend what happened. For a second, her son seemed to consider her offer. His hand reached up to her and she made a move to grab it and missed as his hand wrapped around her neck. He pulled her close. I don't want your apology. He snarled. He would have accepted it. The weakling who sought your love, sought your acceptance. But he's dead, you killed him. Now all that's left for you to have is me, and I cold care less for this pitiful attempt at reconciliation. I want nothing more than to see you and every other Amazon of this island suffer. At one point I would have let the world burn just to get my revenge. But I know that the world is not worth destroying for my own selfish gains, there are too many people out there who I have come to care for. Hippolyta's eyes widened in shock. That's right, mother, I escaped. Like your attempts to kill me, your prison was nothing I couldn't overcome. It took me less than a fortnight to find my way past the guards, the wards, even the eyes of the gods. I spent years on the outside, and I learned things. I found secrets that are better left buried and truths that could turn all of Paradise Island on its head. Tell me, when were you going to tell Diana about her father? Hippolyta lunged forwards. Being held in her son's grip, she was more than close enough to land a heavy blow across his face. Speak not of that. No one can know. She hissed at her child, her eyes narrowed and filled with consternation. Why not, mother? Her son laughed humorlessly. Is it because of what would happen to her, the criticism that the others would raise, the wrath of the Hera and the other gods on Olympus? You never worried like that when you revealed the nature of my origin. I could have been the product of a little tryst with a random sailor like all of you do thrice a century. Instead you chose to reveal truth. The truth that I was the son of hell, that I was an abomination born from some sick rape that occurred. Then again I suppose that caring for a male is too much to ask from you, like every Amazon, after all look what you did to your sons and brothers. With those final words spoken he threw his mother away and walked to his father. The death gods stood, gloating over the defeated forms of the members of the Justice League, as each of them stared up at him from their places scattered in the dirt. Aha, you thought you could defeat me, the god of death itself, fools, the lot of you. I have 10 times the strength of that fool Ares' little modals. I am unstoppable. I am. He was cut off as a hard blow pushed him forward into the walls of the cavern. Diana's brother stood behind the death god with his fist out, his body pulled seamlessly into a fighting stance as he waited for his father, who was buried up to his waist in rock, his legs sticking out and flailing. What's the matter, father? He asked with a nonchalant tone. Not used to being tricked. Hades tore his head and body free from the rocks and glared with raging fire at his son, who was smirking back unafraid. You dare challenge me, boy? You forget I am the god of the dead. Hades' body began to change, his normal human appearance transforming into that of a godly monster. And you too forget something, father. I am your son. The prince's body began to change as well, surrounding his form the shadows of the room seemed to condense and gather around him. They attached themselves to his body, forming a mass of midnight black armor that resembled that of a medieval knight. The change did not end there as more and more shadow latched onto the man, blurring his outline, and alongside the dim lighting of the cave, made it hard to discern where the armor ended and the darkness truly began. 2 green lights blazed from the eye sockets in the helm, showing off where the prince's face most likely was before the radiant light dulled down to a near indiscernible glow that was almost completely lost in the shifting darkness of the armor. In some kind of finale meant to add to the already frightening transformation, 9 blades emerged across his body, 2 of them forming at his sides, while the rest arranged themselves in ascending order across the man's back. At the lowest point on his back was a sand brown sword with blue lines running along it. Second was a deep blue sword with black lines on it. Third was a grey and red sword with a shell pattern layered on the sheath. Fourth was a red sword that had what looked like monkey jaws clamped around the sheath. Fifth was a grey-white sword that was much bigger than the rest. The sixth sword was much like the fifth but was more fluid in its design. Seventh was the last to be attached to his back and was green and dark grey, which looked like the wing of an insect. At his left side was a blade with what looked to be ox horns holding it in place and pink octopus tentacles securing it. The ninth and final sword rested at his right side and was decorated with orange and red with a fox head on the end of the sheath and had a running fox as a guard. It was a traditional jan common in Asian countries but was slightly longer than most of the other swords outside of the fifth. "Well then my son, shall we proceed?" asked the death god, drawing from the earth his own demonic-looking blade, inlaid with bone and rubies and an edge that spoke of its danger. "Yes father, we shall," said his son as he pulled out the first sword. "Very well, come and let me teach you a lesson in respect Nathaniel." Diana and Hippolyta stared briefly at the two, both of them feeling slightly rattled by both the events that had transpired and the name that had just been spoken. Both Hippolyta and the gods themselves had decreed that Nathaniel's name never be uttered. It was just one more act of denying him recognition. To hear that name after more than 15 years, it seemed alien and foreign to the queen when she herself had given him the name when he was born. Father and son rushed at each other, hacking away with their swords with skill and precision that took lifetimes to achieve. At first Hades seemed to be pushing forward, achieving superiority over the younger man. Before Nathaniel kicked his father between the legs, causing him to howl in pain as his form was littered with cuts. "You, how dare you?" he yelled out, his voice significantly higher than it had been just seconds before. "How dare I?" asked Nathaniel, his voice filled with mocking. "How dare you? I've been waiting for years for the chance to face you in single combat and now you present me no challenge." The death god roared at the insult and charged at his son. Nathaniel's eyes narrowed and a sadistic smile morphed onto his face. Rushing forward Nathaniel ducked the swing his father had launched and used his sword to sever the god's hand. Hades stumbled back and grabbed the stump where the limb had rested, blood spurting from the stump as pain registered across his visage. Nathaniel took the first sword and threw it at Hades, impaling it into his forearm and pinning it into the wall. While the death god tried in vain to pry the blade from the wall and free himself, Nathaniel drew each blade in rapid succession, using them to strike and then pin different parts of his body to the wall of the cave. The 8 swords struck into the center of his chest, completing a seal as black markings formed from each sword, creating an elaborate design on the walls. "You dare lay a hand on me? I will make you suffer, boy. I will kill you and torture you after death. You will join father in eternal punishment," and suffering Nathaniel drew the 9th sword slowly, allowing the sound of steel scraping against steel to fill the room. The quiet sound somehow smothering the noise of the struggling god. "I will burn in the pits of Tartarus," he said, brandishing the blade. "But not before you do." He stabbed. The sword lodged in the middle of Hades's forehead, right above his eyes. The god's mouth was open in an expression of pain and horror, and he lay unmoving, pinned in a circle and trapped by the sharp sting of the blades. A single drop of his golden blood dropped from his head, splashing to the floor in the silence. In the instant the blood dropped to the floor, black and golden flames burst forth from Hades's corpse. They consumed Nathaniel, forming into a grand dome of fire and immortal essence, obscuring everyone's views. Moments passed before the flames began to die down and Hippolyta and Diana raced forward to where the prince had fallen. He was laying on the cold stone floor, steam and smoke coming from his body as he gasped for air. The 2 Amazons fell to their knees in front of him, his sister grasping his hand in both of hers and his mother cradling his head in her lap as she stroked his face. "My son," Hippolyta gasped, her hands weaving through his singed hair. "What have you done?" "I have freed us all," he gasped out, coughing heavily at the end. "The hellfire that burns the death god, it has burned all traces of him from this world. His blood has been purified, purged from my veins." "But without it," Diana stammered to her brother. "Yes, without his blood my body will no longer hide the wounds I have received through my life. Death will come for me." Already his arm was fading away like an illusion, disappearing from his sister's hand before she frantically grabbed his remaining arm. Thousands of scars were beginning to appear everywhere on his body. Nathaniel's eyes widened in agony, his body reverting to its proper condition, made dead so many years ago from the thousands of fatal wounds he had endured from his sisters and mother. He coughed and blood shot past his lips. Hippolyta and Diana panicked at the sight, desperately trying to find some way they could ease his pain as he spent his last moments with them. "No. Don't stop this. This is what I want. This world has given me much, it has taken much, but now, it is my time." The light left his eyes and the form of Nathaniel, Prince of Themyscira, lay still in death. Diana buried her head in his chest, begging her brother to come back to her, to sit up and jest that it had all been some terrible game to get revenge, unable or unwilling to believe that he was gone from the world. Hippolyta pulled Diana off of Nathaniel's chest and cradled her daughter as she wept for her fallen brother. As a final act, Hippolyta ran her hand down Nathaniel's face, closing her son's eyes and placing 2 golden coins to cover them. May you know a peace in Elysium that we could not give you here, my most precious gift. 1 month later. The Justice League stood on the watchtower, looking at the door, which bore the name Wonder Woman. Since they had returned from the mission on Themyscira, Diana had not been the same. The death of her brother so soon after his liberation had broken her heart, and she had barely left her room since it had happened. Batman pounded on her door, trying to get Diana to listen to reason. "Wonder Woman, we have a meeting, we need you to attend." "No." Came a response that seemed more like a sob than a shout. Superman pulled Batman away from the door, hoping that the confrontation could end in a peaceful way. "Batman, let me handle this, I don't think pounding on her door and demanding things from her is the best way of going about this. Her brother just died. He died a month ago and he betrayed us all. He helped us. He used us." "Superman, there is a very distinct difference. Whatever he did to us. He's dead and Diana is hurting. You can't just tell her to get over it. Grieving takes time." Batman glared at Superman but didn't argue any further. "So what do you suggest? How about asking politely?" Batman almost seemed to smirk, but nonetheless decided to move out of the way and let the Man of Steel through. Superman walked up to the door and proceeded to knock. Instead of the flat refusal, this time the door shot off of its hinges, slamming the Man of Steel into the wall opposite the room. Batman and the rest of the League peered into the room from the door in what might be considered a very comedic way. They saw Wonder Woman in her costume with a look that would send any sane person running for cover. Unfortunately, most of the heroes weren't completely sane. Batman was the first to speak. "Diana, I know that the loss of your brother is painful, but we need you to attend this meeting with us. It's a matter of the utmost importance." Faster than he could blink, he was pushed up against the wall next to where Superman was still trying to pry himself out of the man-shaped dent he had left in the wall. "I don't care, Batman. My brother gave up his own life to save a place that hated him, and now he's gone. Do you get it? Gone. I'll never, ever see him again. I'll never get to apologize for everything that went wrong with his life, never get to do anything with him ever again. And why? Because of his damn selflessness." Diana's rage over the course of her rant gradually died and was replaced by a heart-wrenching sob. She fell to her knees and cried into her hands. Batman looked down at the Amazonian, and if one looked closely, they could see a flash of actual compassion and remorse flash across his face. It was in fact John who stepped forward to provide comfort to the distressed Amazon. He placed his arm over her shoulder in a comforting gesture before bringing her to her feet and leading her to the conference room where the League's latest meeting was being held. Themyscira. Meanwhile, the island of Themyscira was busy having a celebration. News had spread extremely quickly through the population that Hades had been slain. What was not known was who did the deed. Many assumed that it was either their queen or princess, but could not verify these rumors because the queen had not left the palace since the events. Most believed that she was recovering from her battle with Hades, and this only convinced the residents of the island to celebrate more, dedicating it to their queen's grand victory and her speedy recovery. The reality was very different. If any of the Amazons had come to the palace lately, which had been practically sealed off. Inside the palace stood the queen's most trusted council. They were drumming their fists against the door to the queen's room in hopes of rousing her from her isolation and getting her to interact with her subjects. "My queen," said Philippus in a frustrated voice, the dark-skinned Amazon seeming more and more annoyed with her queen's refusal to answer them. "Open the door and speak with us, please." They heard no response, and finally deciding that checking in on their potentially injured queen was more important at the moment than respecting her privacy. "Penthesilea, please, if you would." The mighty Amazonian warrior moved to the front of the group and Spartan kicked the doors apart. The entourage entered only to find the room dark, the curtains drawn, a hole dug in the floor with the marble carefully removed and their queen hoisting a coffin with the royal symbols on it that the Amazons knew all too well. "My queen. What are you doing burying that thing in the palace?" The queen of the Amazons glared at her sisters. "Because he is my son and he deserved a proper burial," she said with conviction. "Why would you want that monster to be buried on the island? When did he even escape his prison? The guards never reported anything wrong. I am burying him here because it is his right as the prince of Themyscira. I denied him his birthright for so long, but I will do this one thing at least to try and atone for my mistakes, no matter how insufficient it truly is." The Amazons stood shocked, near paralyzed in astonishment. They were so bewildered by their rule that they did not even notice the queen's refusal to answer their second question. Hippolyta had been one of the ones who was most supportive of the righteous vengeance they had laid upon the prince, but now she seemed to have completely changed her mind, flipping entirely her previous views, and was actually sounding like she genuinely cared about the cursed boy. "My queen, why have your thoughts on the boy? He is not just a boy, he is my son," the queen stated with a conviction not seen in her words for some time, which brought the Amazons back somewhat. Deciding to obey her lest they incur her wrath, they changed their words, but not their attitude. "Very well, my queen, why have your thoughts on your son changed so suddenly? He was a spawn of Hades who tainted our island with his very presence. Now you are going to bury him underneath the palace itself. And how did he die in the first place? We haven't heard anything from the guards at his prison that said he had perished." The queen pulled again on the rope, hoisting the coffin even higher into air and towards the hole she had dug to bury her deceased son. He escaped and came back with his sister Diana. The island may believe that it was Diana or myself who struck the blow that killed the death god, but it was not. It was Nathaniel. The Amazon stiffened slightly at the use of the boy's name, which had not been spoken for over a decade and a half. "My queen, surely you were confused or hallucinating. Why would your son work to kill Hades? He was the boy's father. And I am his mother despite my poor parenting." The last bit was whispered only to herself, but the others heard it all the same. In any case, Nathaniel tricked his father and slew him. As Hades died, the death god was consumed in hellfire that burned all traces of him from the mortal world. Including my son himself. His final sacrifice will not be in vain, as long as I rule this island, and I will bury what little of my son I have left in the place where it is meant to be. Many amongst the entourage felt like protesting the decision made by their queen, but seeing the stubbornness in her eyes, as she hoisted the coffin further into the air and towards the hole, made them realize that no amount of arguing would deter their queen from her mission. Bowing to her, they all left the room, closing the doors behind them as they left. Hippolyta lowered the coffin carefully into the hole she had prepared for it, knowing that with no effort she could later go down the royal crypt, joining the body of her own mother. The first queen of Themyscira who was killed millennium ago, and move his coffin to its proper place. Having finished her task, the queen once again gently set the marble floor piece back where it belonged and began to cry tears of sorrow. Before, when she had had a mission, putting his body down in the crypt without anyone knowing, she had been able to hold off the feelings of sadness by holding on to some kind of obligation to not weep until her task was done. Now it was, and she could feel the incredible sense of failure and guilt sweeping over her. Water poured from her eyes like rain from clouds as she lamented the loss of her boy. "Hollow," she muttered. Was this how he had felt when she had betrayed him, when she had stabbed him? He told her himself that he didn't love her, that he didn't care for her. Thinking back on her final moments spent with her child, she could only cry harder. He told her that that part of him, the part that loved and cared, was dead, but what made it worse was when she'd finally managed to kill it. It hadn't been early on during his childhood, with her cold hatred and willful ignorance of his needs as a babe. Nor had it been during his young adolescence, with physical violence to add to her already hateful demeanor. It had been that day, 15 years ago. Such a short time considering how long her son had lived in pain and neglect. The worst part though was to know what she could have had, the life she could have saved, had she only the chance. It broke her inside. Hippolyta could feel some part of her heart and soul shatter from the terrible blow. It was that moment she remembered something. Something her son had told her long ago when she had questioned him on their immortality. People waste so much time and then they ask for more, because if they could have all of that time, they could fix any mistake. But people don't get that time because they don't deserve it. Because if you can't make the most out of every single moment, you don't deserve a single extra second. His tutor, the normally kind and patient Hellene who served as chief historian on Themyscira, had struck him soon after, believing his words to be an insult to the Amazons and a claim that his sisters did not deserve their gift of immortality. She herself had forgotten his words soon after, but now, sitting on her floor, wallowing in shame and misery, she finally understood what her young son had been trying to tell her. It was him, he was talking about himself. He thought, even back then, that one day one of us was going to kill him. He knew. There she was, a woman with access to infinite time, she would never age, never die, at least not naturally, but in the end, she couldn't make the most of her time with her son, and now it had run out. And she could think of no one less deserving of more time than herself. At that moment the seconds seemed to drag on for decades, the minutes felt like centuries, and for the first time in millennium the queen of the Amazons prayed for a man. She prayed for her son, that he was safe, that his soul had found its way peacefully into the eternal bliss of Elysium, that perhaps one day, in spite of all of her crimes against her innocent child, she could join him, she would spend an eternity begging forgiveness if she had to. Please. She quietly begged the gods above her, her tears splashing on the marble floor. Please let my son be safe, let him be warm, let him have peace. I could never give it to him, but please, I beg that you might. She sat on the floor, trying in vain to find some sign that her prayer had been answered. None came. Her tears drying up after hours of crying, Hippolyta resolved to go to a place she had not gone to for many decades. Her son's chambers. The revelation that she had not seen her son's rooms, where he had slept, eaten, and lived for his entire early life, for so long, despite having spent enormous amounts of time in the rooms of her daughter, was just another reminder of her failure as his mother. Deep in thought, the queen of the Amazons did not realize that she stood in front of her son's door until she felt her feet stop in front of giant white double doors. She could swear she still felt the dreary and depressed atmosphere that had accumulated over the course of decades of hatred, vengeance, pain and sadness. She pulled herself together under the oppressive aura and pushed the doors apart, entering the room used by her son so long ago. She was shocked to see almost everything in the room was in need of repair. The curtains that should have ensured privacy were instead on the bed. Pulling it off, Hippolyta ignored the 15 years worth of dust that flew into the air as she saw the lack on any kind of blanket or covering to provide warmth on cold nights. The rest of the room was in a similar state of disrepair, and from the dust it had been that way since long before her son had been imprisoned. Fresh tears flowed once more from her eyes as she reflected on the past. What a joke she was. She could have had something wonderful, a son who would love his sisters both by blood and by bond, a daughter who would be the perfect princess, perhaps even grandchildren to watch as they grew and signaled the next generation. All of that was gone, nothing more than a fantasy. It only made her pain grow, not that she could have guessed what her son would have wanted, she'd never even tried to find out. The saddest thing was it wasn't for a lack of ability, she knew everything about Diana because she had made it a priority to maintain a strong relationship with her daughter. Her son, on the other hand, was another story. She had never made any attempt to make a good mother-son relationship, preferring instead to wallow in her hatred of both him and his father, and in doing so, she had doomed any chance of knowing anything more about her firstborn child than just his name and appearance. Moving over to the desk that was located on the far side of the room, she leaned on the rotting wooden chair. Surprisingly, it held her weight as she inspected the desk. It was the same one that was in Diana's room, one of the only things that did not need repair as it was made of solid marble. She ran her hand over the surface as if trying to get a sense of what her son had done here. Afterwards, she gingerly took hold of a familiar book that rested on the table, her eyes widening. It was a journal, she knew this if by no other reason than Diana had one just like it. She hurriedly opened the book, desperate for something that might let her feel some sliver of hope to understand her child. Entry 1. Mother brought home a new girl today. I hate her. Hippolyta stared at the book. That must have been when Nathaniel had been around 6 years of age, just after she had brought Diana back to the temple. Everyone says she's a gift from the gods. I wonder if they can take her back. Reading her son's words shocked the queen. Ever since she had brought back her daughter from her birthing bed, her son had adored the little girl. It had been the one thing in his life she had never tried to find any kind of fault with. No one lets me see her, but they say she's pretty. Helene's much meaner than normal now, she says I'm expendable now, that soon I won't be around anymore. Hippolyta ground her teeth, Helene would pay dearly for that. She stopped herself, she'd lost any right to feel betrayed or angry about how her child was treated when she'd begun treating him like that. Mother says that she's going out to witness the games. Maybe I can take Diana and give her back to the gods, then all of the sisters will stop being so mean. The entry ended there. Turning to the next page, hoping to find something, anything to explain why her son had started loving her daughter. She was instead met with the sight of moths and eaten pages. Entry 2. Mother is. Turn. Aisle. Hippolyta flipped further and further through the book, hoping to find just one more entry that was whole. Tearing though the pages, she tried in vain. Insects had long since made sure that nothing was left, just fragments of entries, small scattered words as pages were eaten down to the bindings. Finally she came to the end, the last pages. Entry. There was no number, the insects had eaten it off. It's my day of anointment today, finally. No. Hippolyta whispered, the gods couldn't despise her this much, the fates couldn't leave her with this. She wanted to stop, wanted to throw the book away and run screaming from the room, but her guilt wouldn't let her. She couldn't leave until she knew exactly what she had killed that day. I'm finally going to be confirmed as Prince of Themyscira. I'll be in charge if something ever happens to Mother, gods forbid. Hippolyta smiled, even after all she'd done he'd still been worried about her safety. Diana's excited too, the little one's been bouncing off of walls talking about what a great king I'll be one day. I really should slow her down, too much talk like that and some of our sisters might think I have ideas. The queen scowled, her anger getting the better of her. Of course they would, none of her sisters would ever assume anything but the worst of her son. I just hope that this will finally convince Mother that I'm not evil. Tears again gathered in her eyes, it was painful to know that that was what her son thought of her. Then again his thoughts weren't inaccurate. I've been waiting for this my whole life, mother's been postponing it for years, saying I'm not ready or that my sisters need more time to get used to me. I guess my patience has finally been rewarded. The choked sob erupted from the queen's throat. She knew what would happen when he put the book down, when he left for his anointment. She wanted to yell at him not to go, to run away from the island and find people who would care for him better than his family, though that was not a high bar to clear. I guess I'll find out. The entry ended there. Hippolyta fell to her knees, clutching the book tightly to her chest as she let out a near inhuman wail. She sobbed and cried and screamed to the heavens her rage, her torment, her sorrow, her despair. She cried for the child she had lost, for his childhood, robbed from him by her, for his birthright, stolen by her, for his heart, broken by her, for his life, ended because of her. Taking hold of every last bit of courage she had, she turned the page. Final entry. She sobbed. Is this all I'll ever be? Tears made tracks down her cheeks. I wonder what they'll do to me. The worst we could. Though Hippolyta as choking sounds came from her throat. I wonder, did I do something to deserve this? No. She wailed out loud, trying to convey to him her sorrow. You didn't do anything, it was us, it was all us. I almost expected this from mother, from the others. It hurt to know just what he thought of her, but she was proud of his deductive skills. But Diana. Hippolyta's blood ran cold. I should have sent that traitor back to the gods when she first came around. How had she done it? How had she managed to ruin everything good her child had ever had? No, she didn't mean it. Hippolyta was confused, the writing's quality was starting to degrade, becoming harder to read. She betrayed me. The writing was back to being perfect. She didn't understand. The writing was barely legible. She's just like them. She was more concerned now than ever. She loves us. A slight twinge of fear stirred within her. She betrayed us. She was crying harder than ever before. She didn't mean it. She loves us. She tried to read the words of encouragement, the words that defended his sister, but they were badly scrawled in tiny penmanship at the bottom of the page. Still it seemed that her son's kindness had gotten the last word. She smiled slightly, taking this one bright spot and turned the page. Her blood froze in her veins. Written in impossibly still wet blood on the inside of the book's back were two words. Kill everyone. Hippolyta dropped the book. Scrambling across the floor away from it as if just being near it would kill her like it said. Moments later her back slammed hard against the frame of his bed, apparently that was as much as the piece of furniture could take because seconds later the legs collapsed and the bed fell to the floor. Staring at the book, at the small bit of understanding she'd gained by reading it. Looking at the room, at the four walls that had housed more misery and hate over the last 2,000 years than they ever should have, Hippolyta let out a choked sob and prayed once more to Hera. Please, Lady Hera, let me see into the past, let me see the life of the one who lived here. She looked around the room as ghostly apparitions played out a scene in front of her. The ghostly image of her son laid on the bed, wrapped in the curtains and moving fitfully in his sleep. Light filled through the curtains and he stirred. Untangling himself from his makeshift blanket he moved throughout the room, his mother following him with a sad expression on her face. He moved through the room. Pulling things off the shelves as he went, the ghostly doors slammed open and another person walked in, their face covered in shadow, so she could not identify which one of her sisters it might have been. "Get ready, boy." She snapped at him as she threw him a new tunic. "The queen has an announcement to make." Disgust and venom were dripping from every word, as if she was a poisonous snake that her son had offended with just his existence. The two left the room and the simulated day changed to night. Nathaniel stumbled through the room in a cut-up tunic with a broken sword in his hands. He flopped onto the bed, shrieking into his pillow to find some relief from the pain that he was surely suffering from. Hippolyta would have run to the boy and tried to comfort him, but as this was nothing more than an illusion, she could only stand helplessly by and cry out. Desperate for this scene to either change or to allow her to help her injured child. Her eyes snapped over to the ghostly door as it creaked open. Even so long ago the room was in need of fixing up. Around the open door peeked the head of a young Diana, probably 5 or 6 years old, looking sheepish as she entered her brother's room, youthful ignorance and innocence blinding her to the degrading conditions her elder sibling was living in. "Big brother," she said quietly, tiptoeing over to the bed. Despite her previous turmoil, the Amazonian queen could not help but let out a small smile at seeing her eldest children together. Diana was now next to the bed and climbed up onto his a second later. Sitting cross-legged next to her brother she began to poke him in the side. Big brother, wake up and play with me, we have to play." She whined in an adorable voice that brought back such fond memories for the queen. Suddenly the lump that was Nathaniel sprang up and leapt onto Diana, eliciting a scream of fright that quickly morphed to laughter as Nathaniel tickled her sides, laughing with her, even though Hippolyta could clearly see the pain in his eyes. "That will teach you not to disturb people when they are sleeping, little sister," he said jovially, Diana still laughing hysterically. "Stop it, big brother, please please stop." She managed to gasp out in between fits of shrieking laughter. "Why should I?" he asked, pretending to contemplate it as he tickled her. Please." She managed, her laughs now becoming less happy and more Protestant. "Fine," he said, letting go of his little sister and sitting with his back facing her, waiting for the inevitable attack that he knew was coming. Sure enough, Diana bowled over Nathaniel and the two of them ended up at the foot of the bed, Nathaniel laughing a genuine laugh as Diana looked around confused at the sudden shift in view from her place sitting on his chest. Had her tear ducts not been empty from near constant crying over the course of the day, Hippolyta would have shed tears of joy and sorrow, joy at the scene that was playing out in front of her between the two. And sorrow that she would never be a part of such wonderful interactions between her family members. She took a deep breath and let it out shakily. "Thank you, Queen Hera, I am grateful." The queen of the Amazons moved over to the images, ghostly images, kneeling in front of the image of her son, as his eyes expressed a type of genuine joy that she could not remember seeing on his face during his time with her. She was grateful that he had had some experience with true happiness, though sad that she had never brought him any of it. She reached out and ran her palm over his incorporeal face, but her hand phased through it, reminding her once again of what this was, a memory of a time long past that could never be reclaimed. Hippolyta rested her head against the mattress, letting what few tears she had left soak into the long-forgotten sheets. Suddenly she felt a soft touch on her shoulder, a hand gently resting on it. She flinched and turned quickly, the lack of sound alerting the presence of another convincing the queen it was an enemy. What she saw, however, caused her to gasp in shock. There, standing before her, was her child. Nathaniel's gently smiling face, filled with kindness and slight longing, was looking down on her. Hippolyta looked up in wonder at the apparition before her. "Nathaniel," she whispered, reaching forward to touch her deceased child. His fingers reached him only to pass through his ghostly form. "I'm sorry," she whispered to her son's spirit. "I am so sorry for the pain I caused you. I can never apologize enough to right the wrongs I committed against you and those that occurred under my watch. I have no right to it, but I ask, no beg, for forgiveness." The ethereal form looked down at the Amazonian queen. On her knees and pleading for forgiveness with tear tracks running down her cheeks and eyes red and blotchy from crying. She looked the picture of a broken woman. He knelt down to her. "I will never forget, it is what made me who I am." His voice echoed and another sob passed through Hippolyta. "But I can forgive what has happened, for I have moved past it." And on those last words his hands moved forward as he encircled her in one last action from a son to his mother. The queen's eyes widened as she felt her son wrap his arms around her kneeling form, his touch feeling solid even though she could clearly see right through him. She closed her eyes, choosing to appreciate this last moment with her child, soaking in the warmth of his form and for the first time ever choosing to commit to this moment with her son. In the end, however, her child was not truly there, but Hippolyta enjoyed the hug for as long as she could until she felt it fade away, signaling that this time she was given with her child was over. As she opened her eyes she saw him fading away before her very eyes. His mouth moved, uttering one last message to his mother. "I will always be here, I gave my life for the world and our people, to shield them all from the wrath of petulant gods, I will continue to do so. Whether or not they deserve it, the powers that rule above mortals must be kept in check, and only I do that. Perhaps we will meet again, in time. Until then, know that I will do my duty. After all, what kind of brother would I be if I could not protect my sisters?" With that, he faded away and in his place was a map Hippolyta recognized as one of Themyscira. Set right in the mountains in the north of the island was a large red X holding the piece of parchment close to her chest. Hippolyta allowed herself to let a small smile rise on her face as she left her son's room, thankful that, even though she did not know if she deserved it, her son had granted her forgiveness. Hippolyta emerged from her stupor, looking at where her son's spirit had disappeared. She saw the map that had been left behind by her son before picking it up and rolling it up and placing it in her robes. She smiled softly as she looked around the room, trying to feel every ounce of her son's presence from his visit. The queen marched from her child's chambers through the halls of her palace. Taking her time, she retired to the bathing area, determined that if she was to carry through her plan, she would need to look her part as the pinnacle of discipline and queenly regality. Pulling herself from the bathing area, she pulled on one of her most prized sets of robes and walked to the throne room of her palace. Sitting down on the large but simple seat, she called to her subordinates. "Call all of our sisters to the palace. I wish to make an announcement." The guard bowed before rushing out to call all the residents of the island to the meeting. Within only an hour the entirety of the island was assembled and all of the women were whispering away, all of them with their own theories on why their queen had called them all here. Hippolyta rose from her throne, grabbing everyone's attention as she cleared her throat and begun. "My sisters, today I have gathered you all here to tell you the news of Hades' death." Cheering erupted from the crowd, all of them overjoyed to be able to hear the tale of how their queen slew a god. But first, I must deliver other, far less expected news. My son, the Prince Nathaniel of Themyscira is dead. Shock rippled throughout the crowd as the Amazons processed the news. Then cheering, even louder cheering, accompanied shortly after. Hippolyta was almost brought to tears by her people's cries of joy at the death of her son before a new emotion surfaced. Anger. Rage coursed through her veins and for a moment she wondered if this was how her daughter felt when she heard her sisters speak so terribly of her older brother, who had never been anything but kind to her and everyone around him. Silence. Her voice roared over the noise of her sisters' chatter, silencing them. I will have none of you speaking ill of our savior. Electa, one of their people's strongest and most zealous warriors, stood from her place beside her mother. My queen, what are you talking about? That pathetic stain is not our savior. He was imprisoned and as you said, he died there. Do not speak out of turn, Electa. The queen's voice was cold and void of any familiarity, making the young woman's eyes widen before they dropped from her stare and she seated herself. Nathaniel was not contained in his prison, he returned in our greatest time of need to aid in the protection of the world and by extension, us. He and his sister, your Princess Diana, returned to confront the vile armies of Hades and the death god himself. The crowd muttered as they took in the news. Most were denying it vehemently, unwilling to believe that the being they considered a vile evil was capable of acting out of anything other than self-interest, despite years of evidence to the contrary. It was my child, my son, that pierced his sword through the death god's body, killing him and destroying himself as well. None of you know the true story of what happened under our island, but today I am telling you. The same boy that many of us, and me myself as well for far too long a length of time, believed to be an evil, vile and putrid male stain upon our lands, gave his own life in exchange for our own. The entire room was in an uproar now, crying out that what she said could not be true. That she was hallucinating, that Nathaniel had tricked her and convinced her that he was not the evil he was. Hippolyta watched and listened as her sisters and subjects cried out conspiracy after conspiracy to explain her son's actions without having to modify their preconceived image of the boy. Finally she could not take it anymore, opening her mouth. Enough. All of you will be silent. The noise immediately stopped as attention was once again focused on the queen. There is no room for accusations of illusion or trickery. Would you believe me so gullible as to be tricked by some false illusion? The room fell silent, none of the Amazons were willing to protest, to accuse their queen of being tricked in such a way was to accuse her of a condition, such as an addled mind. None of you will question this, or do any of you wish to come forth and challenge me over this matter? Some of the Amazons looked like they were considering it, but none took the opportunity. After all, the queen was one of the best warriors to ever come from the Amazonian people, and outside of her son and daughter, she was probably the greatest combatant on the island. You are all dismissed. The words were so cold that the assembled Amazons could practically feel the ice that froze each syllable, prolonging them and anchoring them within the minds of the Themyscirans. Hippolyta watched as each of her sisters moved to exit the hall, knowing that she had lost some of the respect that her people held for her during her millennium-long reign. Even still, she was satisfied. If nothing else, she had made sure that her son's sacrifice was not ignored, nor that he be anonymous after his death. Reaching into her tunic, she pulled out the map that she had picked off the floor. Before turning to the direction of the X looking to the mountainous area that led to a secluded beach, she sent a silent prayer to her deceased child. You have grown too soft, my dear. An aged voice hissed from the shadows. Hippolyta turned, facing the woman as her face morphed into one resembling pity. It stayed as such for no more than a moment before hardening into one of restrained anger. Zeus, you are too familiar. Too familiar, my queen. The old woman rasped. I remember a time not so long ago that you would have agreed with me wholeheartedly. That time has passed. I have seen my flaws and my errors, I'll not allow myself to fall back into such petty hatreds. You call our feelings for men petty? After what they did to your mother? To our people? To me? I wonder if your mind has not been addled by your recent brush with your former lover. The queen turned her glare to the woman, her eyes shining with such fury that Zeus took several steps back and bowed her head in submission. Be careful with how you speak to me, sister, I am not above punishing even one such as you. And what punishment could you give that is worse than my own farce of an existence, forced to know that the woman I loved has fallen to the charms of men not once, but twice, and has sired from those lapses such disappointing children. The old woman could not finish her sentence before Hippolyta slammed her against the wall. You will not speak of my children in such a way, we were friends and lovers once, Zeus, but if you truly believe that a mere brush with death is enough to render me senile or love-addled, you truly did not know me at all. Zeus scowled. I thought I knew you better than anyone, but if you fell victim to the seduction of man not once but twice, then I suppose you always were weaker than I gave you credit for. If you think me weak of mind or body, I suggest you challenge me, whatever theater you chose I will emerge victorious. I wouldn't dare, my queen. I only tell you now that once this sudden change of heart comes back to harm our people, you remember that mankind is not worthy of our trust or our acknowledgement. We shall see, sister, we shall see. As his mother called her great meeting of the denizens of the island of Themyscira, the ghost of Nathaniel of Themyscira stood in an ancient temple. It was as old as the island itself, and it was probably the most important building on the island. Normally it would be heavily guarded, but at the moment all of the Amazons were attending a meeting held by his mother. He would really have to thank her for making this so much easier than it would have been otherwise. The ghostly figure walked into the temple, admiring the architecture. Sitting in the center of the building on a large pedestal was the gem that provided the entire island with its immortality. The massive precious stone had been given to the first queen of the Amazons, his own grandmother, by the gods, but even they had not known the full extent of its power. The large red crystal was not just a means of extending the lives of the Amazons, it was also the last remnant of the Bijou left in the multiverse. The crimson red gem exuded chakra, the substance that had shaped the planet Earth for nearly 20,000 years across 1,000 dimensions, until it was lost nearly 17,000 years ago. Indra and Asura had once again resumed their eternal battle over the course of the world, until finally Indra had won out, besting his younger brother, and in doing so conquering the world and eventually the multiverse. However, despite his strength surpassing all others in the world, those with chakra still fought, still killed and still resisted. Frustrated over the lack of obedience and the fact that his ruled-by-strength approach to peace was becoming more strained with each new chakra user who wished to surpass him, the reincarnation of the sage's elder son decided to seal away mankind's ability to use the legendary energy. It took years of his life and the death of thousands of shinobi before finally he was able to rid the all worlds of every single being who practiced the ancient art. It was only now, more than 13 millennium later, that Nathaniel had rediscovered the power of Ninshu, finding ancient scrolls left behind in places so remote that evidently even Indra had not been able to find them. Moving towards the gem, he concentrated and his intangible ghostly form condensed, his translucent body solidifying and regaining substance. Reaching out his now solid hand, Nathaniel picked the jewel from its pedestal, replacing it immediately with one of equal size and weight. He briefly sent out a small but insincere thanks to his mother, whose feeble attempts at reconciliation had allowed him access to the island after the death of his mortal form. The dead man patted himself on the back metaphorically as he commended himself over his performance in the caverns beneath the island. His last show of apparent self-sacrifice for his mother, sisters and the world had been more than enough to convince Hippolyta to allow his ghost residence on the island when he had appeared to her. Amid his satisfaction, Nathaniel could not help but feel a small twinge of guilt travel through him before he managed to shake it off. He had long ago resolved himself to his plan, even if it involved tricking his own mother, manipulating Faust, Hades, even Diana into creating just the right situation where he could burn the death god's blood from his veins. Nathaniel had planned everything, every word of warning and every syllable that had left his lips to the smallest of contingencies in accordance to his plan, all to reach this one goal, his final, ultimate end. How long has this been coming? He briefly wondered as he strode out of the Temple of the Amazons. It had been years since he'd started his crusade, his mission, everything he'd ever done, all of his plans and manipulations, from the day he'd found out what he was to the moment he'd killed his old form, to even this action of stealing his people's greatest treasure. This is my destiny, I'll not allow sentiment and guilt to cloud this moment, I am too close now to stop here. Perhaps in time he would apologize to Diana once he saw her again. But for that moment he had a goal, and he would be damned if it ended in anything other than resounding success. As he contemplated his past and his future, Nathaniel reached a small cave that was marked on the map he had given his mother. Even this, seemingly sentimental action was not without its own logical motivation. After all, with the Amazons' well-known hatred of him and his mother's desire for reconciliation, would she ever send patrols near the place that could potentially hold the spirit of said child? Would she risk him being discovered? With any luck, that room to maneuver would give him plenty of time to enact his grand finale. Moving to the center of the room, Nathaniel placed a large red stone into the center of an enormous magical circle with an enneagram. Enneagram is a 9-pointed star at the center. Placed at the tips of each point were each of the 9 swords. Forged from the last remnants of the Bijou's tails. His hands flashed through hand seals so fast that they appeared as nothing more than a blur. Finishing on the tiger seal, he placed his hands in a smaller circle at his feet, which was connected to the larger one by 2 lines of runes. The glyphs responded to his touch and began to glow and thrum with power. The 9 swords began to vibrate as red chakra leaked from the red stone, crawling down the points of the star and causing the runes that made them up to glow a bloody scarlet. Light filled the cave, flashing between a soft maroon glow to a shining crimson red as Nathaniel exerted his will over the rebellious chakra of the ancient beings. Now he was realizing just how glad he should be that everyone was away at the meeting his mother called and that the cave entrance was facing opposite the city, otherwise the entire island would be able to see the lights that were pouring out of the cave at increasing intervals. It seemed to go on for hours, at some point Nathaniel didn't even think he was conscious anymore. Time seemed to drag on forever yet move faster than anything he had ever felt before. The amount of energy that was being constantly demanded by him to keep the still growing lumps of chakra contained and controlled was so great that he thought that at any moment he could be drained dry and fade away into an oblivion beyond even death's reach. Finally the bright shining stopped, replaced by a steady dim glow that illuminated the entire cavern. The 9 once misshapen lumps had by then taken the shapes of their respective animal forms, tanuki for the Achibi, cat for the Nibi, turtle for Sanbi, ape for Yonbi, horse for Gobi, slug for Rakubi, insect for Shichibi, octopus for the Hechibi and a fox for the Kyuubi, although none of them possessed any sort of real detail, instead being only translucent chakra in those forms. Taking his hands off the ground, Nathaniel weaved even more hand seals, ending by clapping his hands together. The runes and bijou slowly began to move towards him, crawling across the ground and up his body. They encircled his abdomen, moved up his stomach and wrapped around his entire upper body, each point of the star visible on his front. The 9 forms of chakra sank into his skin, forming 9 circles around the 9 points of the star. When finally the red chakra was no longer visible, the real show began. Nathaniel sank to his knees, vomiting a large amount of blood and bile before screaming in agony. The angry red chakra had no consciousness or will, but its power was rebellious and operated on the simple impulse that all living things shared: survive. Forcing himself to staying awake and resist the corrupting influence of the chakra, the young prince, through sheer unimaginable will alone, remained in control long enough for the final seals to take effect, merging the chakra into a massive volume of power and then combining it with himself. His eyes, which until then had been screwed shut from pain and concentration, snapped open, revealing that instead of his normal grass-green irises surrounding the black pupil, and which itself was surrounded by white, there were no longer any iris or whites in his eyes. The pupil had remained the same, but the rest of the eye had been replaced with a pure purple coloring and contained 6 black concentric circles, expanding outwards with 6 strange tama marks, adorning the first 2 circles in an alternating triangular pattern. Glancing over at a mirror in his small abode, he saw the change that had occurred to his optic nerves. An enormous grin grew on his face, expressing the absolute joy that he was feeling. Nathaniel then clenched his now solid hand, one of the perks of his transformation, and looked out of the cave's doors to the rest of the worlds of the multiverse. "Ah, my own flesh and blood." His final P set and his body returned to flesh. Nathaniel ran to the cave entrance and jumped into the air, taking flight before changing directions. What Nathaniel did not know, the one thing that had not gone according to his plan, was that his mother had suffered no challenges in the wake of her announcement. He had done his mother the disservice of underestimating her control over the residents of the island and overestimating their hatred of him. In fairness, perhaps he had not overestimating their hate of him, more underestimating their fear of his mother. As such, the meeting of the Amazons had lasted just a little shorter than he had thought. That small amount of time, however, was enough for a single Amazon to wander far enough in her rage to see the brilliant lights that had accompanied his resurrection. Bella of the Amazons, one of the island's most accomplished warriors and expert hawkers, stood behind a small boulder that sat near the entrance of the cave and watched as her prince, who she and now all of the Amazons had thought dead, fly from the side of the mountain and take to the skies like the bird she tended to. Seeing his departure, she crept into the room, spotting all the things that the young prince had left behind. Countless small experiments littered the tables, and the ancient gem of Themyscira lay on the ground, its glow significantly faded but still strong. Ella rushed forwards, grabbing the sacred gem and holding it close to her chest before running to inform her queen of the no longer deceased prince's actions. What Artemis did not realize was that the slightest sliver of chakra had wafted off of the stone, sinking into her tanned skin and crawling under it, adapting her body to its power. Unlike Nathaniel, this body did not seek to control it, in fact, it did not even know of its existence. The small sliver of power chose this moment to make itself a new home. The gem still had the power to keep the Amazons young, it had simply lost the power of the bijou that had been sleeping within it, but the gem was boring and it didn't move, it simply sat on its pedestal for thousands of years, and the chakra wanted more, it wanted adventure, adaptation, life. Inside of Ella, the chakra had found what could be considered a utopia. The Amazon was completely oblivious as the small spark of energy flowed through her body, subtly changing it to be more efficient, stronger, faster, more perceptive, and with far greater endurance. It condensed her muscles while growing more to increase strength, increased the density of her bones to the point where even superhumans would be hard-pressed to scratch them, let alone break them. Her eyes flashed a deep blood red from their normal amber as her sight and perception were increased. night vision added, and her capacity to process information increased enormously. The red energy found the dormant chakra coils resting in her abdomen, producing enough to keep her alive, but nowhere near enough to support them both. Merging with her body, her coils began to produce the red chakra of the Bijuu instead of the normal blue chakra humans would create. By the time she reached her queen and explained what she saw, the chakra had fully integrated with her and decided to explore. When Artemis laid her hand on the queen's shoulders as the older woman cried, it took its chance and jumped formella to Hippolyta, changing her as it had the other woman and continuing on its quest to find some source of entertainment. Nathaniel was flying over the Atlantic, his new powers allowing him flight in the same way that Diana's godly blessings did. He was greatly enjoying the feeling of the wind blowing through his hair and the freedom that came with self-achieved flight. Where to next? He wondered, watching as the ocean flew past him as he traveled slightly over Mach 1. Scratching his neck as he came to realize that there were more than a few possibilities for his next destination. There are still a few loose ends to tie up. I can't have anyone knowing who I am. Perhaps he'd have to speak with Waller again, the damn vixen still owed him for his help early in his career. No, that woman's too calculating, she'll make a good ally, but better to keep favors with her well-stocked. I know, I'll visit her, it has been a while. Making a quick turn and heading straight for the North Pole, Nathaniel concentrated, feeling his powers rise up. He opened his left eye, revealing the purple Rinnegan instead of his normal eye. The fabric of space and time tore as he concentrated on the person he wanted to go to, and before long a large hole in space appeared. Increasing his speed, Nathaniel sped through the portal and closed it behind him so as to make sure none could follow him. After all, what good was a vacation if you got called into work during it? This was the first time since her brother's death that Diana had set foot on her home island, and she still didn't feel comfortable being looked at by her people. Nathaniel may have forgiven them on his deathbed, but that didn't mean that Diana had to forgive them for everything they had done to him. Although with the recent information she had obtained through her friends in the Justice League, there was quite a bit that felt she should share with her mother. Egeria walked up to her, bowing slightly and beckoning her to follow. "Princess, I hope you are well," was all the greeting that Egeria afforded to her fellow sister. "I am fine, there have been no significant threats to the world that my team and I have had to deal with. If I may ask, why have I been summoned?" Her reply was cool as she addressed one of her brother's chief torturers. "I am not at liberty to say, Princess, your mother will explain." The two climbed the steps of the palace, entering the throne room to see Hippolyta standing at the war table with the top generals of the Amazons. Diana's eyes widened at seeing them all here. If all of her mother's most experienced commanders were present, then it must have been something important. "Mother." She spoke clearly and Hippolyta turned, her face changing from one of despairing frustration to happiness. However, there was also something else in her eyes that she had almost never seen in her mother's eyes. Worry. "Diana, it is good to see you again, my daughter." The two women embraced, happy to see each other again. "Mother, why have you called me here? What has happened?" "It is your brother, Diana." "Nathaniel. What has happened? Which of our sisters has desecrated his corpse? I'll have them drawn and quartered." The Amazons around her looked on, shocked and incensed at their princess's mistrust in them, but also slightly disturbed by her anger and apparent brutality. "Nothing has been done to his body, Diana, it is his spirit that we worry for. There has been a development regarding your brother's after-death activities." "After-death activities?" Diana parroted back at her mother, incredulous. "Yes, my daughter. We believe that your brother has returned to life and thaw." "What?" screamed Diana. "What do you mean he returned to life? Where is he?" Hippolyta moved to comfort her daughter. "We believe it was just yesterday. Ella came to me claiming she saw strange red lights emerging from a cave in the northern mountains of the island and went to investigate. When she arrived she saw Nathaniel covered in black seals and runes that crawled all over his skin. After that he leapt from the cave and flew away into the sky. I have to go after him, I have to talk to him, it's been so hard this last month. I wanted to tell everyone in the world of what brother had done, but no one would ever believe such an outrageous claim. Where is he?" "We do not know, all we know is what Ella has told us. Your brother emerged from a cave in the northern mountains covered in black ink drawings with a solid body of flesh and blood. We have not seen him or his spirit on our land since then." Mother Diana said in a rather judging tone. "Are you sure all of this is accurate, that none of this is simply a ruse created by our sisters to slander my brother in some way?" "How dare you?" exclaimed Ella, who had been allowed into the meeting due to the sensitivity of the topic. "I have served our people as an Amazonian warrior since before you were even a glimmer in your mother's eye. You believe that I would try to deceive our queen? When it comes to my brother, I have learned from experience the lengths that everyone on Themyscira would go to ensure that Nathaniel is not remembered as anything other than a stain on our so-called purity." "Enough," interjected the queen, forcing both Amazons to back away from one another. "Diana, I went up to the cave myself, I saw what was in there. Dozens of different formulas that could be used to bring the dead back to life, and none of them were without their own share of sacrifice and consequences. The reason you are here is that of all the things we found there was almost nothing of any real value to locating your brother. Some instructions on alchemical solutions, a few magic spells whose origins we do not know of, but there was one thing. Hippolyta led Diana to the center table where there was a single note. This note was apparently important enough for him to encode. The positive side is that it appears to be similar to the code the two of you used when you were young to swap notes and cheat in your old classes. Diana looked down slightly bashfully as her mother gave her an amused smile. However, because none of you managed to decipher your code, we have been unable to actually read the note. I am asking you to translate. Diana looked thoughtful for a moment before conceding, as she too wanted to know what her brother had left to say. The next few minutes consisted of Diana decrypting and translating using the cipher she and Nathaniel had together created, a little project he had made up to make use of their boredom in the endless hours of study time in Themyscira's libraries. When she finally finished the translation, she picked up the piece of paper with the now understandable text and began to read. Dear little sister. If you are reading this, then that means that my plan worked. I do not know if mother or your sisters have told you or not, but the only way they would have found this note is if I am alive and not on Themyscira. Before you give this note to mother, there are some things I wish to say to you before everything, and I ask that you not show this part to mother or our sisters. The first is something I want to make absolutely clear that you know, and that is that I will always love you. No matter what you do or what atrocities you or I commit, I will always be there for you as your older brother, so do not ever hesitate to contact me for whatever you need, even if it is simply someone to talk to. I hope that you can say the same for me. The second is the truth, because if anyone deserves to know the truth, it is you. It was me. It was all me. As you know, I gave Faust the amulet he used to conquer Themyscira, but that is not the end of my machinations. I am the one who gave Hades the idea to use Faust. I am the one who arranged everything that led up to and included my own death. I am sorry for the sorrow I have caused with my plan, and I could never apologize enough if I made you cry. When we meet again, we will have a long talk, I promise you that. Until then, goodbye, and I hope that no matter what happens next you will not judge me too harshly. I am entitled to my rage. With love. Prince Nathaniel of Themyscira. P.S. Give me a call XXXXXXXX. Shaking her head, Diana finished the letter and was quite torn over whether to show the note to her mother or to keep her brother's secret he had trusted her with. On the one hand, Nathaniel's actions were treasonous to the highest point and should not go unpunished. On the other hand, could she violate her brother's trust after he had so plainly put his faith in her? And if she did betray him, would he simply see her as just another Amazon waiting to stab him in the back? Part of her told her that he would never simply cease trusting her. That his letter told her that he would always love and stand by her. The conflict came when the smallest voice in her head brought forth a little doubt. Will you become like them? Will you betray him? Deciding that the contents of the letter could be considered at a later date, Diana tore off the first piece and did as she was instructed, tucking it away in her bracelets, contemplating getting longer pants with pockets to replace her shorts. Walking out of the small room she had been given to work efficiently, she handed the rest of the letter to her mother. Dear Amazons of Themyscira. I am sure that this letter brings great dissatisfaction to all of you, but I am alive, and I really must thank you for leaving the temple and the crystal completely undefended. It was very kind of you, and it made my job so much easier. Now to start off this little letter, I would like to say fuck you, fuck all of you. There, now that we have that out of the way, we can begin fully. This letter is a warning to all the Amazons who live on this island that I will be back, and when I return, every single one of you will feel the despair and contempt that I felt every day of my past life. Know now that the next time you all see me, I will bring ruin to this island and everyone on it. No one will be safe, and no one will be spared my fury. Forgiveness is not so easily given, nor is it earned with a few words and some kind gestures. It will take much more than that to convince me of your remorse, and unlike my mother, none of you feel any for my treatment, for my suffering at your hands. You all will continue every day to convince yourselves of your innocence, that my treatment was deserved and that you acted reasonably, so I too will be reasonable. This the ground I walk on, call me your king and declare me supreme ruler of the Amazons. You will be my slaves for all eternity and will follow my every order to the letter, without a hint of resistance or hesitation. You will be my servants, my caretakers, my whores for all time, and maybe I will not raise the island and slay you all with my blade. If not, then I will gladly kill you all without discrimination or a care in the entire world. Now that my piece has been said, feel fear, feel despair, feel utter hopelessness, knowing that no matter what preparations you make, no matter what precautions you set, I will return for my revenge. Sincerely yours. The future king of Themyscira and the ruler of the Amazons. Nathaniel. Setting the letter down on the table, Hippolyta was so shocked by the words written by her son that she collapsed into her throne. She felt tears flow down her eyes as the feelings of despair that her son would soon force all of them to face overtook her. She placed her head in her hands and sobbed. Her boy, her son. She realized that her apologies would never be enough, but to think they had meant so little, then she remembered that he had mentioned her remorse. Did that mean that there might be hope for her and her people? Diana was also in shock. His letter to her had said not to judge him harshly, but the price he demanded for his forgiveness and mercy were too high. The Amazons would never allow themselves to submit to a man in the way he wanted them to. They would fight to the bitter end, and Diana knew that if what was written in the letter was accurate, most, if not all, of Paradise Island would be rendered into a crater, and as a proud warrior of Themyscira, she could not allow that. No matter how strained her bonds with her sisters were. The other Amazons were staring at their queen who was sobbing into her hands on the throne. Normally when some kind of outside male force threatened the Amazons, she would be the first to decree hostilities and prepare for war. Ever since the death of her mother by a male assassin, she had been especially hard on any male intruders to the island, even sentencing males born of their trice-century copulations with sea vessels to be thrown from the cliff to the waters below. Had Hephaestus not interfered and offered to trade the boys for weapons? Now instead of that strong-willed, capable and fearless leader they had relied upon for many centuries, there was a broken woman who was wrought with hopelessness and sorrow. "My queen," said one of the council members. "My queen, what are your orders?" Now may not have been the time to ask the woman, however, as her anguish seeped from her thoughts on her son to her stance on their defense. "My son," she stammered through her sobs. I am so sorry, Nathaniel." Diana took charge, seeing her mother so vulnerable and devastated was something she had never seen before. "Defend the island's boundaries, have extra sentries at all times. We must ensure that if my brother returns, then we will be able to repel him if we cannot find a way to defeat him." Princess, said Philippus. One of generals and one of her mother's closest friends and advisors. "You do not truly believe that he could defeat all of us? We are Amazons and we will not be felled by one arrogant man." Diana's temper flared as her sisters once more underestimated and insulted her brother. "Do not underestimate Nathaniel, General. He is stronger and better trained than most others on this island. He single-handedly defeated and killed the god of the dead himself, as well as defeating both myself, several of my compatriots and even our queen. You would do well to remember just how dangerous your tortures have made my dear brother." Philippus narrowed her eyes at Diana, recognizing the blatant insult to her intelligence and the reminder of the fact that everything that was happening with the prince was a direct consequence of their own actions. "Very well, I will ensure that our sisters know of the increase in security and make sure extra defenses are established." An enormous boom interrupted their conversation, followed by several more in quick succession. Once of the guards rushed in from outside, a panicked look on her face. "My queen, the city, it is burning." The entire group immediately left, rushing into the main city, even as more explosions rocked the island and set fire to more buildings. Diana flew up into the air, hoping to scope out the damage and identify the most vulnerable areas. From the sky she looked down on the city and saw just how well her brother had planned this assault. The armories, weapons lockers and food stores were all alight, Amazons running to and fro to try and save what little they could as the majority of their supplies were destroyed. Diana knew that the food was not a real problem practically. On the island, Amazons did not need food to survive, as they were kept sustained through the magic of the island. The real problem with attacking such a resource was much more a moral victory, while the destruction of weapons and forges served a much more practical end. Staring down at her burning home, Diana began to realize just how bloody this war could become between her brother and her sisters. More importantly, if it came to an all-out battle, whose side should she choose? While Themyscira was burning, while the Amazons rushed to save their island homes, while Diana pondered the consequences of her brother's declaration of war, and while Hippolyta was trying to overcome her grief for her own failure on behalf of her son, Nathaniel was doing something quite different. Opening his eyes, he found himself lying sideways on a bed. Shaking off his drowsiness, he pulled himself from under the covers, exposing his muscled chest and toned abdomen. Nathaniel reached over to the bedside table, searching for his personal effects that sat atop a nightstand undisturbed. As he moved over to claim him items, an arm reached over his shoulder, grasping onto his chest and pulling him back to the bed. The arm was long and slender, with skin in a sheen gray that only seemed to add to the beauty of its owner. Her hand gripped hard onto his side, and long sharpened fingernails tipped with dried blood from when the woman's grip had punctured skin during the most passionate moments of their lovemaking. Her own strength allowing her nails to pierce his normally indestructible skin. Nathaniel's lover pulled him towards her before rolling on top of him, her naked body pinning him beneath her as her supple breasts pressed firmly against his chest, her legs entwined with his own, and her arms moving up and down his body, before coming to rest on him right above, where her own body held his in place. "Leaving so soon?" she purred, leaning into his ear to nip at his lobe. "I'm not anywhere near done with you." A smile crept up on the Amazonian prince's face as he stared into the deep red eyes of his lover. The Amazonian daughter of Darkseid. Grail. The tale of their meeting was one for the ages, a story to be written and reimagined for centuries to come. "Of course not, my love," he said. Taking advantage of her momentary weakness at the title, he flipped their positions. As they came to a halt in the aftermath of her surprised squeal, he had placed himself on top with her writhing beneath him, her wrists pinned above her head by his own larger hands. "I was simply checking to see if my little present for home had arrived." Leaning down, he sealed his lips to hers in a hungry kiss, fueled by passion and lust, but containing a touch of genuine affection. "Well then," she said, rising to sit up while he moved back to kneel to maintain eye contact, although the temptation to allow his gaze to wander down her naked form was oh so great. "I hope you understand your responsibility to me, Nathaniel. You seduced me all those years ago, and so you will take as much time as I require to satisfy me." Nathaniel smiled deviously. He and Grail had started out as adversaries, the two of them had met long ago during his time traveling the world, the universe and in time, entire multiverses. It had been in one of his forays into the upper multiverse that he had first encountered her. Both he and her had been chasing a relic of a bygone era of Earth, a remnant of chakra locked within an enchanted sword, one of the 9 he had since collected. Suffice to say he had come to blows with both Grail and her mother, Marina Black, over the blade and had ended up stranded with Grail in some long-forgotten dimension in his own dark multiverse. Thus began their affair. The two had spent nearly a year working together to survive, dodging beasts and madmen who had inhabited the shattered landscape of the old and worn Earth. Somewhat ironically, they had ended up camping out in the ruins of that world's paradise island, waiting for Nathaniel to regain enough strength to rip a hole back to the true multiverse. Inevitably, months of near constant contact and teamwork had softened them to each other, though it had been a long and arduous journey. It had taken nearly a month before she would say more than 2 words to him without trying to slit his throat, and another 2 months more before they were able to have civil conversations. 5 months and they had become friends, and 2 months after that Grail had invited the prince into her bed. Their time as lovers living together had perhaps been the best of his life. A person who made him feel wanted, alive and fulfilled. Diana had done that in some ways, but there was a marked difference in the love of a sister and a lover. Grail was passionate, strong, independent and intelligent, and her beauty only made her more desirable to him. Soon after their escape back into the multiverse above, they had made a habit of sneaking off from their adventures to engage in their lusts. Those nights of passion had eventually evolved into daytime meetings, modern dates leading to a deeper connection than simple fulfillment of carnal desire, and transformed into something far more meaningful. "Oh my dear." His voice was absolutely gleeful. "You know I would never seek to leave you unsatisfied, please allow me to atone for my mistake." He moved forwards, pinning her to the bed with his mouth, his kisses slowly moving from her mouth to the area just behind her ear, down her neck to her collarbone. He laid numerous kisses across her form until he reached the soaking expanse between her legs. Grail's head flew back, her hair laying itself all around her as she collapsed down onto the soft mattress, her mouth open in a deep, sensual moan as he serviced her. From his place, Nathaniel could only smirk. Everything had worked out, his death and resurrection, his letter back home, his little gift that he had left for the Amazons, and all the future gifts that would make their way to the island of his birth. Oh, Themyscira had a reckoning coming, and gods help anyone who tried to stand in his way. Meanwhile, across the multiverse. The old man watched on silently, observing the multiverse from his place, resting on its farthest edges. For so long the old man's 3 eyes had trained on different universes, looking for those two presences that indicated that his children were born again. How he longed for them to cease their endless combat, to put aside their need for bloodshed and dominion over the other. But alas, it was not to be, and his 2 sons, long since having forgotten what it was they both fought each other over, continued to fight. He had watched in grim mourning as his eldest son had purged the worlds of chakra, forcing not just his own world, but the entire multiverse of worlds to simply forget. However, he could not stand idle by and allow for all the knowledge he had given over the millennium to be lost. Small pockets were preserved, laid to rest where they could be reawakened, shared when the time came. Sadly, that time had long since passed as mankind had lost its ability to mold the essence of life. Chakra. Oh, his knowledge had been used. Most certainly, dozens of religions had taken his scrolls and formed their own ideas of the nature of chakra, some coming close to the original meaning, some so far off that if he still possessed the ability he would be laughing at the absurdity of some of them. What he had not planned for, however, was the knowledge that he had long buried being found by his own eldest son, the very being from whom he had hidden the knowledge from more than 13,000 years ago, but perhaps this incarnation would be different. If not, then Asura would be his last hope of stopping his older son. Themyscira. It had taken the better part of an hour, but the fires that littered Themyscira had been extinguished and the defenses ordered by Diana had been established. Now the princess looked on from the sky as her sisters moved around the damaged island. They still moved dutifully and quickly, but there was now something else in their gait. Caution, suspicion, fear. All of those emotions were obvious to Diana from her place flying so far above them. She sighed, this was what she herself had feared. Nathaniel's destruction had caused a rift amongst her sisters, since many thought it impossible to organize and perpetrate an attack of this scale without the help of an Amazon within the island. There had been no evidence that even suggested that her brother had received aid from any of the Amazons, but the idea, and the strange comfort it brought, was enough to cause the rift. Diana could actually understand that treason was a comforting if distressing option, but she knew that to her sisters, it was better than the alternative. That Nathaniel had bypassed their already impressive security and orchestrated the attack without any aid and without a single Amazon, even noticing his acts of sabotage, until it was far too late. The Amazonian princess flew from her perch high in the air and landed softly on the steps outside of the royal palace. The war council had long been dismissed, and the only Amazons who remained in the palace were the guards, the servants and her mother. Diana walked through the halls of the palace, making her way to her chambers. She would spend the night to ensure that her people were safe. She pushed apart the doors to her rooms, surprised to see her own mother standing at one of her windows which overlooked the main city. "Mother." Diana took a step forward before her mother turned to see her. Diana had almost never seen her mother cry, the only time being at Nathaniel's death and then at his letter, but now she could see the tear tracks that stained her cheeks and the redness of her eyes, proof of her grief. In her hands was the letter she had decoded, marks on the paper showing where her mother's tears had fallen. "Daughter," she said, her voice heavy with melancholy. She turned from the woman over to look at her daughter's girlhood bed. "What are you doing here?" asked the princess. "I used to spend nights in here, watching you sleep as a child." Hippolyta didn't answer the question, instead choosing to ignore her daughter as she stared at the bed. "Sometimes, I would find this place empty. It was all I could do to not summon the guards the first time. I found you not long after curled up with Nathaniel in his bed." Diana's eyes softened. "I remember, you woke us up and sent me off to my room. I struck him once you'd left." Diana's fists clenched. "I berated him quite harshly. You were meant to stay in your own rooms. After all, how could you conquer your fears if he simply allowed you to run into his arms at the slightest provocation? I threatened him that every time he did, I would send him to train with Egeria. He never said anything. He never sent me away. I know, he never could refuse you anything. He bore his punishment silently, like a true warrior. Why are you telling me this? Do you simply wish to make me angrier? I want to understand." "Understand what?" "Why he loved you." "What?" Hippolyta pulled out Nathaniel's journal, opening up to the first page. Entry 1. Mother brought home a new girl today. I hate her. Mother, what is that? Everyone says she's a gift from the gods. I wonder if they can take her back. Diana reeled back in shock. It was her, everyone had called her that when she was young, but who was writing? Her brother. "Mother, what are you reading?" "No one lets me see her, but they say she's pretty. Helene's much meaner than normal now, she says I'm expendable now, that soon I won't be around anymore." "Mother, stop." "Mother says that she's going out to witness the games. Maybe I can take Diana and give her back to the gods, then all of the sisters will stop being so mean." "That is enough." Diana grabbed the book from her mother's hands, but the woman didn't seem to notice. "Why did you do that? Why subject me to that? I want to know how he came to love you. So you read to me his words of how he wished I was gone. I want to know how his seeming contempt turned to unwavering affection. Why? I just need to know, Diana. You must have a reason." "My reasons are my own." Diana stared contemplatively at her mother, as if trying to work out a frustrating puzzle. It took a few moments before she came to a realization. "You want to know how to do it? To get him to love you again?" The queen's flinch at the accusation was all the confirmation she needed. "Surely you don't think that, brother, is so simple. Curse it all, daughter. Just tell me." Wonder Woman stared down at the journal, seeing its sorry state. "I don't remember it myself." Hippolyta turned to her daughter as she sat down on the bed, holding the tattered book to her chest. "Nathaniel told me about it years later. It was my 10th birthday, you remember, I brought back a harpy's egg that year." Hippolyta smiled, she did remember, it was the beginning of a marked improvement in her daughter's training, but her son had been nowhere to be found at the time. "I had just defeated and beaten Elective and run from the arena. I ran for a long time, I don't even remember how long, when I came across Nathaniel training in the woods." The princess's eyes clouded over as she remembered that night. "He was remarkable, I remember think of nothing more than that I wanted to be as skilled as him, as graceful with a sword. I suppose I still have some lengths to go. You will get there, with time." Hippolyta placed her hand on her daughter's shoulder. Diana shook her head. "Regardless, I ran to him, I very nearly tackled him to the ground. I wept into his chest, like a child. It was the only place I could show weakness. I asked him why the other children didn't like me. He told me it was because they didn't understand me, that they were angry I was better than them and simply striking out at me because of that anger. He was right. He usually was when it came to us all. Go on. I asked him why he wasn't angry with me, why he wasn't mean to me like the others. He told me that he was at first. That everyone had called me better than him from birth. He'd been angry. Diana giggled. He even told me he planned to go to Olympus and return me to the gods. And then? Hippolyta pushed, a small smile forming on her face. He told me that when he finally sneaked into my rooms he looked at me and I smiled at him. That's all. That's all. I don't know if such a thing will work anymore. He said that it was the first time anyone had smiled at him and meant it. Hippolyta gritted her teeth at the unintentional blow. That was really all it took. I expect that back then, even now it would have been a rare thing. You are not wrong, my child. I am sorry for reading his journal to you. Please don't do anything like that again. I promise not to. Mother and daughter hugged, sharing their sorrow for their lost family. Do you believe he'll ever forgive us? I don't know, mother, but he won't if they don't try to earn it. No one will. Anything he does we'll just convince ourselves it was undeserved, that it is just another symptom of man's flaws brought about by their arrogance and desire to dominate. It was at that moment that Wonder Woman received a call from her communicator. The princess apologized to her mother before answering the call by tapping the small earpiece that she wore anytime she was in costume. At her acceptance of the call, the voice of Batman came through. Wonder Woman, there's been a major breaking at Star Labs, we're needed at the scene. The comm went silent and Diana didn't even have the chance to ask a question before the Dark Knight hung up. Sighing once again, she turned to explain her newest responsibility to her mother before making her way back to the world of man. Nathaniel. Hours, nay days could have passed before the two lovers collapsed next to each other on their bed, chests heaving as labored breaths were taken and skin slick with sweat and other fluid laid atop the silken sheets. Grail turned on her side, her arm now draping itself over Nathaniel's chest and her leg wrapping around his own. I must admit, she gasped out as she recovered from their usual routine of sexual activity. You never do fail when it comes to making this worth all the secrecy. She let out a carefree laugh, a sound that to Nathaniel was better than the most beautiful music. He let out his own breathy laugh, his deep breaths mixed with the occasional gasp. I am glad that you are pleased, my lady, I do so love our time together. He pulled her close to him, her head and shoulders resting on his chest and her eyes closed as they both relaxed and basked in their post-coital bliss. Cuddling was a rather new activity for the two of them, but something that both would admit to the other, though to no one else, that they enjoyed. It was nice to let one's guard down and simply relax. Nathaniel laid small kisses on the top of her head, affection being the dominant emotion in these romantic acts, instead of the rabid lust that dominated their usual displays. Grail sighed in contentment, for once showing an emotion other than her sadistic tendencies and her lust for battle and destruction. For the two of them, these few moments with each other were the perfect escape, a small time when they need not be anyone else, instead they could simply be two normal people just being together, without the stress of vengeance or a mission of death and destruction to pursue. We could leave, you know. Grail's eyes opened and narrowed in confusion before moving to look up at the eyes of her lover. What? We could leave, just travel to some faraway dimension where no one knows us. No Amazons. No Darkseid. No missions or revenge, just us. You know I can't do that. We can. Grail turned, straddling him, but this time it was not an invitation for more sex, this time it was so she could look him in the eyes. I'll still dream about him, I'll still hear his voice in my head, it won't go away and it won't until he's dead, Nathan. And you can't give up your revenge any more than I can give up the mission, it'll eat away at you until you resent me, or I'll resent you for making me give up my mission. I want us to have a life together, but I want that life to last. I want us to be happy and not just silently get bitter because we gave up our goals and wants for some peaceful life. He stared back at her, wanting but unable to deny her point. As much as he wanted to, he knew that even though he said he could, he wouldn't be able to just let his home go. He needed to make them pay, he needed his vengeance. Okay. He said. But can we stay like this just a little longer? She smiled at him, one of her rare genuine smiles that always made him smile back. That, I can do. The two laid together for a while longer, just enjoying their time together. But all too soon the world no longer chose to cease its restless plans, just for the two souls to have their peace. Grail was the first to move, untangling herself from Nathan's side and donning her cloths and armor. Nathan moved slower, but nevertheless left the comfort of their shared bed and pulled on his own trousers and shirt. Grail pulled out her Mothra box and with a loud boom she was gone. Nathaniel stared at the place she had just occupied with a look of disappointment before his green eyes flashed purple once again and space bent in on itself. Using the residual energy of the boom tube his lover had just left in, he pulled open a portal. The distortion in space was a window into the greater multiverse, and now that he had the Rin Sharingan he didn't need to wait weeks gathering energy before opening portals. Pushing forward he waded down through the multiverse until he reached the proverbial bottom of it. Taking that one last plunge he descended from the true multiverse into the dark multiverse. Almost lost amongst the billions of worlds he found his home Earth and pulled himself into its reality. The portal reopened in the middle of a large room on Earth -104 and Nathaniel looked out of the window of his penthouse apartment. His apartment was almost too large to be called such, given that it took up the entirety of the top 3 floors of the massive building, which he himself owned. The place was furnished with his many possessions obtained from his adventures. In the fireplace a piece of the primordial flame burned, constantly filling the room with a pleasant warmth, no matter the time of year. Aside from the piece of the first fire on Earth sitting in the middle of his room, every inch of his 3-story apartment was covered in various items, small and large mementos of his many travels across the multiverses. As he wandered around the room, checking to make sure that nothing of his had been disturbed by the cleaners he had hired to take care of his home, he saw automatic calendar that he kept hanging on his wall. Viewing the date he scowled slightly. It seemed that he still wasn't perfectly proficient in his conjuring of portals. He last one had bent the fabric of space-time so much that the journey that should have taken just hours had instead taken more than 2 weeks. Making his out onto the open-air balcony, Nathaniel looked out over the city of Venice, the city he had chosen to make his home over a decade ago. The grand architecture and beautiful canals made for a truly stunning view, and taking a moment to himself, he soaked in the sun's rays and the warm breeze. As his time to relax came to an end, Nathaniel retreated back into his home, walking through its rooms until he reached his destination. His library. Nathaniel walked along the many shelves, running his fingers across the multitudes of tomes and books that made up his collection. Reaching the center of the library he pulled several rolled-up scrolls from the shelves and brought them over to an intricately carved wooden desk with a plush armchair. As he laid the scroll on his table and unfurled its contents he smirked. Bakuten, let's see. Singapore. 3 women looked out over a balcony, gazing in awe at one of the most magnificent metropolises in the world. Oh. My. God. Yes. Behind the 3 stood a man encased in shadow, his form hidden as the 3 women marveled at the city. How did you get this room? Asked one of the women. My job, said the man, pouring a glass of champagne. Requires me to be on top of the world. What is it you do? She asked, looking over the urban cityscape. He hummed, thinking for a moment to give a believable excuse. I guess you could say I'm the son of a king. One of the women, a blonde-haired, blue-eyes beauty, turned to him. So you'll be king someday? She asked, her mind briefly wandering to gaining the man's affections and a seat on some royal court. Now that's an idea, blue eyes. Maybe I will be. He handed her the glass. Truth be told, my father he appreciates faithfulness but he ain't that kind of guy. She finished for him. The man smiled and his teeth seemed to glow in the nightlight as he took off his obviously expensive jacket. Insightful. I knew it from the moment I laid eyes on you. And no, not really. My father her gets around. Pisses his wife off to no end. The black-haired girl to the far right shifted her gaze but didn't turn her head. His wife not your mother? Like I said, he gets around. And where he's gotten to now, I need to find out. You see, he's missing. Coming up behind the women he rolled up his sleeves. The view is spectacular, no? One of the tallest buildings in the world, his words trailed off as he came behind the trio. It's like we can see for miles. Said the black-haired girl. Miles? Said Apollo, grinning as he grabbed all 3 women in his arms, channeling his power through them. AHHH. They yelled out in vain as they felt the power of the sun god flow through them. Why, my beautiful girls, you can see forever. Venice. Nathaniel panted heavily, letting sweat and moisture pour down his back as he dumped a bottle of iced water over his head. All around him his training room, made up of a small pocket dimension he'd created using his Rinnegan, there were signs of all kinds of damage. The earthen ground was distorted and warped, a nearby lake had had all of its water used and spread around the entire area, and the surrounding forest was aflame with a mixture of red and black fire. Lava slowly dripped off of a moderately large stone wall, constructed quickly to block a layer of superheated rock that had been sent at him. All around him the signs of a great battle being fought could not be ignored. But the man was alone, no enemies surrounded him, and no opponents remained. Whatever challenge he had been facing it apparently had ended in his success. I guess Bakuten isn't a good counter to Jotun. The blast force just scatters the lava like shrapnel. I have to be careful about where it ends up falling, or else I end up stepping in a pool of molten rock. It's better than having a wave of lava cover you. Nathaniel turned to a figure that was standing apart from the scene of the battle. The man could pass for his twin, but was really just a clone. I have the Susanoo to take that kind of damage. Susanoo takes more energy than a quick Bakuten. It's faster though and I don't have to deal with the lava scattering. True. Should we move on? No, I've gone over at least half a dozen Kekkei Genkai. Time for a break. If you're sure. Permission to dispel now. Granted. The clone dispersed in a puff of smoke, leaving behind no trace he had ever been there. Nathaniel let out a slight groan as the memories of the last 6 hours of his training came to him, much like the others. The difference was that particular clone had been meant to watch the battle from a distance and analyze his performance with the newly studied bloodline limits he'd been practicing with. A need to spend more time practicing control. Been forcing too much chakra into the techniques, I'll have to fix that. Nathaniel stretched his sore muscles and released a relieved sigh. Well, all in good time. Time, unfortunately, is not as readily available nor plentiful a resource as most would like. Standing at the entrance of a barn in rural Virginia, there stood a figure. Its features hidden by the cloak of peacock feathers with a matching hood drawn over its head. It moved forward silently, the footsteps making no noise as bare feet trudged across the sodden earth. Finally, once inside the barn the being's legs came into view, revealing toned yet feminine features attached to a beautiful female form that aside from the cloak, lacked any form of clothing to cover her modesty. Trailing behind her the cloak dragged across the ground and as the garment moved with the woman weapons were left in her wake. Moving to the back of the barn a wide assortment of tools decorated the back wall and the hand reached out to grasp the old rusted sickle that hung there. Dragging her delicate finger across the metal the rust in time was wiped away, revealing polished pristine steel. Turning to the frightened animals that had begun to panic upon her arrival, she approached the 2 horses that stood in their stalls. Raising the metal the beasts neighed loudly and fearfully before instantly they were silenced. The 2 horse heads fell to the floor and from the bloody stumps of the dead animals, 2 pairs of hands reached out. Grabbing the sides of the gory opening 2 human forms pulled themselves up as if rising from water. In a small farmhouse not far from the barn a man with blue-tinged skin and bird-like eyes peered out of a window, feeling the power that had made itself known at that moment. No, he muttered under his breath. Turning towards the other occupant of the room he moved forward. Zola, we must leave now. The woman looked unmoved by the man's urgency, choosing instead to keep her shotgun aimed at his head. We? She demanded. Make that you, mister. I don't know how you got in here but. Listen to me girl. The man cut her off. They've come for you and your child. Who? Zola asked. Assassins. If we don't. Get out of my house. Zola yelled as she moved and opened the front door. You will die here. The Birdman finished. Suddenly the sound of thundering hooves could be heard moving closer. The Birdman pushed Zola out of the way as an arrow zoomed past, striking the man in the gut and sending him flying backwards before crashing into a small coffee table. The thundering of hooves drew closer and within moments 2 centaurs burst through the door into the house. Zola! Yelled the Birdman as he threw the young woman a key. Grasping it a flash of blinding light shone from her and in that instant she disappeared. London. The blonde woman rematerialized in a rather modest apartment building, laying on the floor she looked around the sparsely decorated room and saw a figure laying in a bed. Walking up quietly she reached out to lay her hand on the woman's shoulder in an attempt to rouse her only for the arm to shoot out at the sudden and uninvited intruder. What are you doing? Asked the woman as she hoisted up the smaller female. Them monsters. Zola choked out. They were trying to kill me. Are you? No, I am not. Diana of Themyscira rose from her bed, tying her bedsheets around her as a makeshift robe. From her place not slumped on the floor the blonde woman coughed and sputtered as she got her breath back. These things, they were oh god and there was a man with eyes and he was in my home and. How did you get in here? Asked Diana. The man threw me a key. Zola said, holding out the key that was thrown to her. Diana gasped in surprise recognizing the key as one used by the gods. You're going to have to give me that. She said, only for Zola to clutch the piece of metal closer to her. No. Choosing to ignore the protest Diana moved over to her closet. What is your name? Diana asked Zola. Zola. She responded. Zola, my name is Diana. I want to help you as she spoke she opened her closet to reveal various weapons and pieces of armor. And I can take that key right out of your hand. But I'd prefer it if you gave it to me willingly. Zola looked down, her gaze cloudy. I'm afraid. She muttered. You probably should be. Came Diana's reply. I'm not feeling what you say her voice trailed off as she recognized Diana's change in clothing. Wonder Woman. Diana. Diana clarified. And you're safe here. She assured, securing her wrist cuffs. Now give me the key. Diana reached for the key, only for Zola to grab her wrist and grip the key, activating its power. The two found themselves surrounded by a blue field before they were standing in front of the same farm Zola had just left. Well, Diana drawled. That was stupid. Yeah? There's no I was gonna be left. I meant of me. Interrupted Diana. A sudden yell of pain emanated from the house, setting both women on guard. Stay close. Diana warned as the two approached. From the dark doorway a single feather drifted down to the ground and a deadly arrow flew past towards Zola. Diana pushed the blonde back as she used her wristbands. The two centaurs galloped from the house to engage the Amazon and fulfill their mission of terminating the mortal. The male monster charged Diana and attempted to stomp her head in. Dodging to the side, she avoided death by horse before she flipped forwards. Zola ran to get away from the other monster as the female centaur chased her, intent on ending her. Diana slammed her head into the horse creature's head as she reached the height of her arc, grabbing his sword as it fell from his hands. Spotting the white-haired centaur nearing Zola with her sword raised, she threw the sword in a deadly spin. The blade's deathly edge cut through the beast's arm, and with those wounds inflicted the two monsters retreated, their mission failed. Diana turned to Zola who was now walked towards her. I told you to stay close. She scolded gently. I will next time. I swear. Amazon. Came a pained voice from behind the two. A figure walked out of the shadows, the man who had tossed Zola her key, stood with an arrow embedded in his gut. You shouldn't be here. Take the girl and run to the ends of the earth. He reached and pulled the arrow from his side, the arrowhead coated in blood. Protect her or the queen will see her dead. Hermes. Yelled Diana, choosing to check on the injured god. Diana. The messenger said weakly. What have they done to me? The impossible. She responded as she tended to the dying god. Ha. He chuckled. That must have gone the way of the Pantheon failure, what a horrifying end to an endless life. You are not dying, Hermes. Insisted Diana, placing pressure on his wound to stop the blood from flowing out of the wound. Forgive me, I don't know what I am doing then. He jested before his face turned serious. Zola, her life is important. Zola turned, her face alight with anger. That's one thing my life isn't, meaning you're wrong. She yelled. You said those things were here to kill me and my child, but I don't have one. Girl, you are pregnant. Assured Hermes. She is? Asked Diana incredulously. By Zeus. OSH said Zola. Singapore. Apollo stood behind his oracles as they finished reciting to him a new prophecy. Said one. Will kill. Continues the middle. One of you? Finished the third. One of me? Asked the sun god. Yeah. They continued to finish each other's sentences. One of your father's children will murder the another and take their place. It's what your father wants. That's so screwed up. They said. That's dear old dad. Responded Apollo. Pulling the strings, the curtain's legs, where is he? He doesn't exist. Yet. The three girls lit on fire as the sun god flared his power with the morning sun. Their cloths burned, skin and muscle roasted, leaving nothing but bones. Fascinating. Apollo continued as the bones fell from the tower, disintegrating on the way down to mere dust in the wind. The sun rose over the city of Venice, dyeing it in a beautiful golden glow. Its nurturing rays reached each and every corner, lighting them up and banishing the darkness of the night. The twisting strands wove their way through a set of curtains, leaking through the cracks and shining over a form lying silently on a bed. The figure stirred, his eyes cracking open and glancing at the clock that rested on the bedside table. 1 a.m. What did I do to deserve this? Nathaniel groaned as he rose, his sheets pooling at his abdomen as stretched his arms and yawned. What do you want? He glanced to the window through which the daylight was coming. Apollo, cut the lights, I'm up. The light changed as Nathaniel spoke, it became a bright orange with a black center. The light gathered, shaping itself into the form of a man. The sun god Apollo stood in Nathaniel's bedroom as the resurrected former demigod stood in his boxers. Cousin. I'm not your cousin anymore. Yes, we saw your little performance with hell. Wondering how I came back? The sun god raised an immaculate eyebrow. Will you tell me? Not a chance in well hell. That was in quite poor taste, Nathaniel. Perhaps, but you are the god of prophecy, I'm sure you'll figure it out eventually. Of course, but I am here about another matter. The matter of Zeus's children. You know. It was not a question. Nathaniel smirked at his once cousin. It's not hard to hear about, your oracles are quite loud. Apollo narrowed his eyes. Do you know anything concerning it? Nathaniel raised one of his eyebrows with a curious look. Why would I know anything? Apollo walked over to a bookshelf standing close to the window. Prophecy is my domain, but you possess more knowledge of the godly and arcane than perhaps any other source in the universe. I want you to tell me if there is anything I need to know. Nathaniel smirked. Getting out of his bed, he stood, shirtless but clad in a set of sleep pants. He walked over to a shelf amongst his bookshelves. He seemed to search through them for a moment before he pulled out a stack of papers encased in a folded, freshly printed and without a single scratch. There's an old story. He said, offering the sun god the file. about the firstborn of Zeus and Hera. Have you ever wondered why the myths never state whether War or the Smith were the first to come from their union? Apollo took the papers from Nathaniel's hand, turning through the pages and glancing through its contents. It never seemed to be of importance. Nathaniel rolled his eyes. And myths only ever include the important details, he said sarcastically. Apollo's eyes were growing wider as he read the scroll. This is authentic. From the horse's mouth. More specifically, a translation from the skin of a Greek witch that was just dug up. If this is true. It is. The balance of power on Olympus could be thrown off. That's the best case scenario. Now that Zeus is gone, it's more likely a full-on divine war could break out. At least if a new king isn't found. You're right, if we are to survive, we will need allies. You'd better find some, I know Moon will side with you. Apollo leveled a sidelong glance at the former son of Hades. You sound as if you will not participate. I won't, the matters of gods mean little to me. And yet you have claimed Themyscira as your own. You have even undone the claim of Hera and the other Olympians to place your own spells upon it. Nathaniel glared at the sun god. My desire for that island is bound by right of blood and right of conquest. You have not conquered it yet, and no god has ever willingly given up what is theirs without a fight. I believe you know what happened to the last god who tried to fight me. Hera is arrogant and vindictive, but she is not stupid. Apollo looked thoughtful for a moment. Perhaps. But still, I am surprised you are willing to offer the Amazons of the island your protection. You've made no attempts to hide your contempt of them. Oh Apollo, if you really can see the future, you should know that what I have in store for them is far more humiliating than simple death. If that means shielding them for a time, I'm more than happy to pay that price. Besides, it means I'll have more time for my own little vengeances before I gear up for the grand finale. You're being rather dramatic, aren't you, cousin? Nathaniel chose to ignore Apollo's mistake regarding their now non-existent relation. What can I say? I'm feeling a little cheerful today. After all, it is my birthday. The halls of Olympus were alight with the sound of deities, both major and minor, going about their business. Countless temples, marketplaces and pavilions lined the massive floating mountain, filled to the brim with countless subjects of the almighty Olympians. Amongst but apart from this peaceful calm, a woman's voice rang out in anger. No. The voice shouted. Standing in front of a reflective pool, clad only in a cloak of peacock feathers, the goddess Hera watched as the Amazonian princess Diana of Themyscira carried away the messenger god. Hermes and her pig of a husband's latest conquest. No, this won't do. As the queen of the gods spoke, a woman with pale blue-white skin entered. She leaned on arching entrance holding an ornate gold goblet filled with wine. What is it, mother? She asked as she calmly walked to her mother's side. You sound distressed. Hera's laugh was devoid of humor. Ha! A thing you're never far from, eh, child? The queen of the gods walked around her pool away from her daughter, making her way to a set of green silk curtains as she undid the latches of her feather cloak. Hera's daughter showed no signs of anger at her mother's accusation, instead seeming to relish in her apparent poor timing. Mother, please. She opened her arms as if for a hug. I just thought you might need some love. Hera turned her back to her daughter, unclasping her cloak and allowing it to fall to the floor as she stepped behind the fabric that hid her naked figure from prying eyes. Love? She scoffed at her child. You have no idea what I need. The woman smiled and sat on the sill of a large window, pouring more wine into her goblet. Really? She asked playfully. You think you're that different from anyone else? The queen twirled a long piece of cloth around herself, letting it and her magic envelope her. Of course I do. She exclaimed. I'm the queen. The daughter finished. A word burdened by expectations. She glanced down at her cup. Perhaps that's why father had his dalliances, no? Hera secured a golden necklace around her neck and glanced at her daughter out of the corner of her eye. I am your father's wife. And yet there are these flings, these women and their offspring constant reminders. The daughter met her mother's eyes. Of how unloved you are. Hera left the privacy afforded by her curtains, revealing in herself to be dressed in fitting, seafoam green wraps showcasing her legs and her midriff, with gold jewelry accenting their lines. She harshly grabbed the cup of wine from her daughter's hand and downed the entire goblet in moments. As she finished the wine, she strolled over to the throne placed at the top of a dais, taking a moment to toss the now empty goblet onto the floor. That damnable schemer Hermes has enlisted the Amazon to protect your father's latest bastard. The younger goddess followed after her mother. Mother. Now there's a word. Hera interrupted, taking a seat on her throne. Hera's daughter walked up the dais as well, seating herself on one of the throne's arms. Let me help you. Perhaps if I spoke to my brother. Hermes. The queen scoffed. You find his forked tongue licking his considerable wounds. Oh. The younger god purred. You mean business. Hera glared out at nothing, seeming to think. There is a price to laying with my husband. Which no one knows better than you, Where are they now? Hera beckoned for one of her peacocks and seemed to take some comfort in stroking its feathers. That cockless coop, so inappropriately named. Paradise Island. Diana walked upon the sands of her home, the first time she had done so in weeks, carrying a dying god and being followed by the latest woman to fall victim to Zeus's foul trickeries. From the trees, unheard yet by the newcomers, voices spoke. Can you smell it, sisters? One voice hissed from the undergrowth. Our air be putrid with musk. As the small group walked into the forest, Hermes stirred from his delirium. You should have left me behind, Amazon. Right. She said, sarcasm leaking into her tone. Bleeding out in the middle of nowhere seems like a fate worse than death. The blonde woman Zola turned from her curious observations of their surroundings to stare at Diana. Hey. That's my home. Diana turned and smirked at Zola. I thought about leaving you there. The voices stirred once again, unseen but now heard. Aye, what hangs between the shanks now fouls my nose. Zola looked around, trying to get a sense of what kind of place she had been brought to. Where the hell are we? Diana placed Hermes down gently, resting his back against a nearby tree before addressing Zola. My home. The voices stirred one final time, carrying loud and clearly over the night's crisp air. Perhaps I shall take my blade and separate the offense from the offender, leave them to shrink and wither on the sand. Diana stood resolute against the voices. Enough of your jests and false words. I am sure you know better than most the scent of a god. Aye, princess. But you once again bring the stench of man onto our island. I care not whether it be of mortals or gods. Enough. The voices stopped abruptly as another spoke up. The Amazons knelt down as a blonde figure wearing red leather armor walked through them. Queen Hippolyta. Diana knelt alongside the other Amazons. Mother. Darkness surrounded him, encroaching on him like a predator stalking its prey before it was banished back to its hovel by his light. Nathaniel surveyed his surroundings, trying to peer through the darkness that made up the space between worlds. Dead. His expression soured as he spoke. Just weeks ago, when he had last surveyed this earth, it had been healthy, not yet ready to dissolve back into the muck of the dark multiverse. The nightmare the world had been born from wouldn't manifest for years to come. Something is accelerating the process. He muttered to himself. He knew that this was no natural event, and despite his vast knowledge of his own universe and many a universe not his own in the realm above, there was much about the all-consuming darkness of this plane that he did not yet understand. A sudden headache formed. A clone had been dispelled, and not willingly either. Nathaniel played through the clone's memories, trying to make out whatever had attacked through the gloom and blackness that surrounded it. Another clone's memories assaulted his mind, once again attacked by a creature of the darkness. An emotion he had almost forgotten settled in Nathaniel's stomach. Fear. Whatever this thing was, it was dispatching his clones with an ease that was frightening. Granted, one solid hit could dispel them, but with their speed and his plethora of ninjutsu and jinjutsu, there should have been some exchange of fire. The memories of 3 more clones flooded his mind. The 3 had tried to investigate the disturbance and find the culprit of the attack. Thankfully this time they had managed to get some idea. As one clone was attacked and destroyed, the other 2 had managed to light up the darkness with fire and lightning jutsu respectively. The creature had quite obviously not enjoyed that, as mere moments later another clone had been impaled on blade-like fingers. Perhaps the only good news was that with the last of its chakra the final clone had inflicted a wound upon the hellish beast. A senjutsu-enhanced storm technique had struck the monster full force, causing a momentary retreat and eliciting a pained cry from it. That triumph had not lasted, as in the same moment the last clone dispelled from exhaustion. Nathaniel raised his hands and formed a cross sign with his index and middle fingers on both hands. Hajukage Bunshin no Jutsu. Instead of smoke, 100 clones simply phased into existence. Find the beast, flush it out and direct it towards me. Roger. The clones spread out in groups of 10, flying off into the darkness to hunt their quarry. Finding himself alone once again, Nathaniel waited patiently, taking the time to flex his powers. If he would be engaged in battle against such a powerful foe, he would need to be ready. The silence was eerie, the lack of sound only adding to the darkness's effectiveness at unnerving him. When the quiet was shattered, it was like flipping a switch. One of the clones in one of his scout parties dispelled, letting the rest know that the beast had appeared. The remaining clones converged behind the beast and formed a barrier, stopping it from attempting to escape. Nathaniel himself flew through the dark, heading towards the ring of chakra manifestations at top speeds. He arrived in moments and was greeted with a sight to behold. The first set of clones had obviously not gotten a good look at the beast, nor had they seen its reinforcements. Flying through the darkness with an ease that almost scared him, a dozen forms flew through the darkness. The clones were holding valiantly, but they had been sent to deal with a single prey, not the multiple that they had encountered. Already Nathaniel could feel dozens of memories flooding his mind as his enemies tore through his sentries. Taking a moment, he gathered his chakra, merging his own power with that of the ever-growing Bijuu locked inside 9 cages within him. He opened his eyes, showing off a Rinnegan eye with the telltale Tomo marks that represented his power. Susanoo? The cry was accompanied with the sound of releasing energy as all around Nathaniel, a massive warrior garbed in armor appeared. He'd seen in visions what the Susanoo of previous Indra had looked like. They'd taken forms closer to the armor of samurai or shogun from the Sengoku period of Japan. His own warrior was different. Unlike their distinctly Asian forms, his own Susanoo looked more like an ancient Greek hoplite. Its head and neck were covered in a Corinthian helmet with a solid breastplate covering its chest. Its arms were covered by vambraces, and the legs were guarded by greaves and armored boots. A further deviation from the standard Susanoo were the weapons it was equipped with. While most he had seen had used twin katanas stored in the armor's wings, his own massive warrior wielded his ifos in its left hand and a hop-launch shield in its right, ready for attack or defense. Nathaniel stood within his creation's head, watching as the silver light of his technique washed over the battlefield, another difference between him and his previous incarnations. The sudden appearance of a being that dwarfed even the great beast tore his foes' attentions away from the clones, which dispersed instantly in order to return their leftover chakra to their creator. "Whatever you are," Nathaniel said into the darkness, staring at the beast and its comparatively tiny minions. "Die." He swung the sword, sending out a wave of silver energy towards the monster. The creature recoiled slightly, perhaps in fear or perhaps in preparation, as the attack quickly closed the distance between the two. Nathaniel's face morphed into a smirk of satisfaction. Maybe he'd been too cautious in dealing with the threat. The Susanoo was simply overkill. The monster let out a shriek, vibrations and sound crashing out like a tidal wave. The wave of terrible sound slammed into the burst of chakra, scattering his attack a moment before it slammed into Nathaniel's armor. The prince covered his ears as the sound tore at his very being. He could see through the one eye that he had opened that his technique was coming undone. The edges of his armor were fraying and leaving him vulnerable to attack. The creature's minions were unaffected, it seemed, as they rushed through the barrage, seemingly without taking any damage. One of them landed on the head of his Susanoo, bringing down a trident and piercing one of the warrior's eye sockets. Others attacked the various chinks in his armor, hitting him with strength rivaling Kryptonians, speed equaling Flash's, and ferocity matching the maddest of beasts. The noise died down, and Nathaniel was once again able to concentrate his power. The broken pieces of his armor repaired themselves, and the little warriors were pushed back into the darkness. Nathaniel looked around for the beast's minions, or perhaps its masters. It mattered not. Nathaniel took his brief opportunity to rush the winded monster. His ifos cut a deep gash into its side, forcing an agonized roar from it. Its talons scrapped over his armor, cutting through his protection and forcing Nathaniel to retreat. "You reek of power." Nathaniel looked at the monster in shock. Had it just spoken? "You are of the darkness, but you have been touched by the light. I can smell it on you." Nathaniel tensed up. He didn't know what this monster was, but he didn't need to be an expert to know that anything that could survive in the darkness of the lower multiverse was not a good thing. "And you are purely of the darkness," he retorted. "You are a creature of wrath and anger." "Oh." The creature laughed. "You know of me, but I cannot say the same of you. You are not one of my knights. You are not one of my 51. Who are you?" Nathaniel's eyes widened. This creature had more of those minions. He was sure those others were its minions and not Master's 51. Maybe more. He didn't know, and he was never comfortable with not knowing something. "I am of a world within this darkness. It escaped before it returned to the muck of this plane." The creature laughed. "Impossible, nothing survives in the darkness. Where is your earth?" Nathaniel inwardly cursed but showed none of it on his face. He'd need to be careful, not make a story open to loose ends. "I travel to the realm above." He was interrupted as the beast rushed him, his hoplon rising just in time to block its claws. "Impossible," it rasped. "Nothing may cross so freely between the multiverses. I know, I have tried. I have found a way," Nathaniel said. He pushed the creature off of him. "I cannot yet bring others, but I can move between the realms of reality." He was lying somewhat. He could bring others with him. It was, after all, how he'd convinced Grayla not to keep trying to kill him when they'd been trapped in the dark so long ago, but he wasn't going to tell this thing that, especially now that it seemed to have a fascination with reaching the upper multiverse. "Then you are useful," said the creature. "You will join me. What do I get out of it?" "You will keep your life. Do not threaten me, I'll kill you." An evil chuckle was the monster's only response. "Very well. Perhaps instead I can interest you in a new world, a world above." Nathaniel's eyes narrowed in suspicion. "Go on." Dagger-like teeth gleamed in the silver light as the creature smiled. I'll give you a world from the multiverse above, any of the worlds, to remake as you wish. Just aid me once we get there. I thought you could not cross the threshold of the other realm. Not myself. But with just a little push another can be persuaded to accomplish the feat for me. It sounds interesting, I'll think on the offer. Very well, when you chose to join me, come to the center of this multiverse. Understood. Good, you seem to follow orders well enough. Nathaniel gritted his teeth, already annoyed by the being's rather casual dismissal of him. And your plan? He asked his new ally. My own, it's none of your concern. I feel it is. I don't care what you feel. Should you earn my trust you'll be informed, until then you'll do your part as I decree it. Now tell me boy, what is your name? Indra. An interesting name. Not so much where I'm from. Very well. The creature turned away, moving to once again surround itself in darkness. Wait. It paused in its retreat. What is your name? Ah, you didn't know. I didn't. Then you are not as clever as I thought. You may call me the dragon. The dragon retreated back into the darkness, slithering quickly through the morass of gloom. Nathaniel tracked the dark and wicked power as long as he could. By the time it had disappeared beyond his ability to sense he could tell that it had passed at least a dozen Earths. Once it was out of his range he cursed. He cursed in 1,000 languages found across 100 universes. It was some time before he finally managed to gather himself and stop spewing profanities. Now I'll have to change plans. He thought. I need an Earth, one I can use and one that hopefully is deserted. Nathaniel looked down at the desolate wasteland that was the Earth below him. Maybe. Taking hold of his power he descended down into the dead universe onto the dead Earth. Touching down Nathaniel placed his hand onto the black dirt that stretched out as far as the eye could see. He closed his eyes and focused, trying to sense the power of chakra laid dormant within the universe. His eyes snapped open and he quickly withdrew his hand, a massive grin forming on his face. The world had indeed ended, consumed by the darkness and ready to dissolve back into the primordial soup of dark creation, but it seemed that through that connection to he could access that power. The pure untarnished power of that formed all universes. Nathaniel smirked, with that kind of energy source he'd be able to proceed with his plans months ahead of schedule, perhaps even years if he could milk this without the dragon or anyone else finding out. He could tell that the beast was a creature of destruction, and though he had entered into a tentative alliance with it, he didn't want to have it try and undo his work. Thoughts flashed through his mind. What kind of precautions would he need to set? Could he hide the entire universe from the dragon? Would he need to? For the time being he'd allow his paranoia to dictate his actions, better to be safe than lose a literal world of possibility. His face setting into a concentrated mask he placed his hands once again into a familiar cross shape. Haju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Instead of the small 100 clones he had made before, infinitely larger numbers of copies appeared before him now. Tens of thousands phased into reality, with more than a few taking meditative positions the rest turned to him, waiting to receive their orders. Create the seal arrays around the planet, hide it and this universe from the dragon, and anything else that might interfere, after that use the natural energy to grow the tree and the Jito Mezo. Small amounts of red chakra oozed from Nathaniel's form. 9 in total separating off and being handed to 9 separate clones. And feed those with the chakra of this world. I want them powerful enough to feed the Jubi by the time I return. If the schedule advances beyond our predictions, one of you dispel and inform me. Understood. Roger. The clones chorused back in unison. 1,000 different groups of clones broke off, running in dozens of directions to set up the seal arrays that would hopefully keep this world both stable enough to complete his plans and hidden from the dragon, who Nathaniel was certain was out there waiting. Nathaniel looked out over the world, watching as the first rays of this universe's red sun peeked over the horizon, bathing the world in a crimson-tinged dawn. He allowed himself to relax, if only for a few moments. Once this was done, he'd be able to save his home universe, keep them from drowning in the muck, and maybe once that was done, he could finally convince Grail to settle down with him. He scoffed a bit at the thought. Grail was too untamed, too adventurous, even if she completed her mission, she would always want more excitement. Though to be honest he didn't think he was built for the simple life either. Still, it was a nice, somewhat comforting dream. Waking up each morning with her sleeping by his side, enjoying a normal day, perhaps the pitter-patter of little feet on the floor, a different kind of adventure. Nathaniel was broken from his whimsy by the buzz of his phone. Looking down he checked the message he'd just been left. Diana. Please I need help. It was all she had to say. Although it was the middle of the night the torches that were lit illuminated the midnight feast and games held on the island of Themyscira. Sitting on the edges of the makeshift ring located in the city's main square, Hippolyta sat with her daughter, discussing the ramifications of her latest involvement in the matters of the divine. This task you've taken on, Hippolyta said. I'm not sure that I have yet. Diana interrupted, leaning forward in her seat. That's good. Hippolyta assured her daughter. Hera's jealousy is not just legend, but fact. If she knows your mortal companion carries Zeus's child, she will stop at nothing, and the outcome will be terrible and tragic. Shouldn't I try to prevent that? Diana asked her mother. Why side with Zeus? Hippolyta countered. Rather than his wife scorned. Mother, I'm not siding with either. Then who? I guess the girl in the middle of nowhere. Zola. Up on a balcony in one of the many homes that bordered the square, Zola looked out over the assembled Amazons, while inside Hermes rested on a bed, letting his leg heal from its wound. This is freaking wild, Birdman. She said, struggling to take in everything she was seeing. Hermes sat up slightly and with a raspy voice said. Be kind. At least call me Bird God. Zola turned to look at the divine messenger. Wonder Woman called you Hermes, you okay with that? Seeing that's my name. Hermes laid back down on the bed. Can I ask you something? When Zeus consorts with a woman other than his wife, he chooses a form that will inspire an uncontrollable lust in them. Do you remember what Zeus came to you as? Zola looked down, thoughtful. A truck driver. Hermes' eyes widened slightly. Or a pool hustler. She rubbed the back of her head. He could have been in a band. I hope he was that guy. Apparently, Zeus didn't have to change his form too exotically to curry your favor. Zola turned to the god of travelers. I like men, Hermes, and I'm not gonna apologize for that. As you shouldn't. He soothed her as she came to sit beside him. But on this island you might want to keep the story to yourself. Speaking of. Zola leaned over the back of her chair. What's Wonder Woman's? She seems different from the rest. Indeed she is, girl. According to legend, Hippolyta the queen, she wished for a child to replace her son and heir. Nathaniel. Wait. Zola interrupted. She has a brother. Not by blood. Said Hermes. Prince Nathaniel was born when the god of the dead, Hades, tricked and raped Hippolyta. But that is a story for another time. Back to Wonder Woman's origins, on a moonless night she fashioned a child out of clay and prayed to the gods for a miracle. When she was done she fell exhausted into a deep slumber, and with the sun above, Hippolyta was awakened by her new child. Wonder Woman is the perfect Amazon, no male seed created her. That's weird. Zola muttered. Most legends are. Hermes replied. Down in the square the Amazons continued their merriment and excitement. Humming up behind Diana, a tall red-headed Amazon made her way to speak with the princess. What say you, Diana? Have a taste for sport? Electa challenged her princess. Diana stood up from her seat, and while tall she was still shorter than the child of Artemis. Forgive me, Electa, but you'd find my form a bit rusty. Of course, princess. Electa haughtily replied. I imagine all your time spent among the mortals has left many bits that way. Diana turned and looked to her mother, tacitly asking for her permission. Hippolyta waved her hand signaling her consent. As you wish. The two proceeded to the center ring, where the hard wooden floor had been drawn back to reveal wooden posts set at various random heights. Electa grabbed a sword and a staff, throwing the longer weapon to Diana. Do you still prefer the staff? She asked. For game? Diana said as she caught the offered weapon. I do. The two lowered themselves, balancing on the posts as they waited, watching to see which of them would make a mistake first. The two suddenly clashed, the flat of Electa's sword smacking against Diana's staff. Electa narrowed her eyes as the two pulled back, before leaping at her princess, her sword poised to strike. She landed and swung in a low cut, attempting to take Diana's legs out from under her, but the princess performed a graceful backflip to avoid the attack. Electa pressed her charge, launching an overhead strike as Diana landed smoothly from her flip. The blade cut cleanly, chopping Diana's weapon in two. The princess adapted quickly, getting into a different stance as she wielded the two halves of her staff as a scream of sticks. The two Amazons clashed again. Electa swinging downwards while rearing back her fist for a punch. Diana used her sticks effectively, striking swiftly at Electa's wrists in order to disarm her before knocking her back, making her lose her balance. Reaching out she grabbed her sister, stopping her from falling onto the hard floor below as the rest of the Amazons cheered their princess. The two left the ring, greeted by congratulations and other praises from their fellows. Off to the side, amidst the celebrating women, Hippolyta did not share in her people's excitement. Rain began to fall as another Amazon. Their people's general Dessa came to her queen's side. My queen, you seem troubled. Here, that's the word described my feeling, Dessa. But why? She asked. Hera knowing. A bastard of Zeus on our island. The queen took a deep breath. Tell me what's not to be afraid of. Out in the forests of Themyscira, a small light streaked across the sky. To most it would appear as no more than a shooting star, but as it neared the island of the Amazons they were about to discover that the light was no mere shooting star. It crashed into the woods, causing a massive explosion that shocked the Amazons of the island. It's the prince. One of them called. He has come, sisters, to arms. The assembled Amazons let out a collective war cry, rushing about to gather what weapons they could. Out in the forest, it was not Nathaniel who emerged from the smoke. Instead, a woman's form appeared. With blue-tinged skin and clothing that could barely be considered such, the daughter of Hera walked up to the first of the Amazon sentries that came to investigate. The warrior drew her sword on the god, unknowing of who she truly was. "On your knees, intruder, or I swear I'll put you there. Are you in league with the prince? Are you his newest torment?" The woman did not reply, she only smiled before her eyes glowed red. She walked up to the Amazon, expecting to be led by as the female warrior, now under her spell, would seek out her sisters and attack. What she did not expect was to be struck across the face, sending her sprawling to the floor. The unaffected Amazon placed her blade against her neck. "I said, on your knees. It appears I'll be forced to bring you to the queen." "No need, sister." From the undergrowth dozens of Amazons appeared, holding various weapons. Diana stepped forward from the growing mass of women. "Who is this, sister?" "I don't know, princess. She appeared from the explosion and refused to surrender when I demanded it. If she is so powerless now, she cannot have been an agent of my brother. I doubt such a plan would fall apart as quickly as this one seems to." "Unhand me." The woman demanded of the Amazon who had moved to restrain her. "Don't you know who I am?" "Ah, now this brash attack makes sense," Diana said as she walked forward, her face morphing into a satisfied smirk. "Strife, you seem to be having trouble." The goddess Strife, known as heiress to most, glared at the princess of the Amazons. "What have you done to me? I can't feel my power anymore. I feel mortal. I smell your brother's work upon me. Tell me, Wonder Woman, what protections have you managed to get him to bestow to steal a god's powers?" The Amazons muttered and spoke amongst themselves, and Diana's smirk faded into a bemused look. "I know nothing of any protections Nathaniel has placed, but if they can halt your advance and spare us your petulant and childish games, I won't complain about such things. Now speak, Strife." Diana took her lasso, wrapping it around the defeated goddess's neck. "Why have you come here?" "The spider-bound state." Strife smiled mockingly at the princess. "All I wish to do is embrace my little sister." Diana scowled. "You assume the mortal carries a girl child." "Ha!" Strife laughed. "I have no idea what father has left crawling in her womb, no Wonder Woman, I speak of you." The Amazons reeled back in shock, as did Diana. Up high, upon Olympus, Hera also watched her daughter speak her piece, her eyes narrowing as she watched her daughter plainly speak such a dangerous truth. Kneeling down in the center of the deserted square, Hippolyta bowed her head, sorrow growing in her chest to levels not felt since she had lost her son. "Diana," she whispered. "My child, perhaps it is my fate to lose my children for my mistakes." The sun shone over the island of Themyscira, still so early in the morning that most were still slumbering in their beds, but within the walls of the royal palace, there was already conflict building. Well, Hermes, given your state, I didn't think you'd come down here. At least not without tumbling down the stairs," Strife mocked her brother from inside a prison cell, as Zola supported the wounded god. "My state?" Hermes growled. "Your mother." His angry Strife interrupted. "And hurt. Jealous and vengeful, and her cruelty makes mine look like play. Then let us unravel your lies so as to soothe our foul temper," Diana said, walking onto the dungeons. "You said I was your sister. I can't think of anything I'd rather not be." Strife barked out a laugh. "Unfortunately, we don't get to choose our family. My mother, she's not very forthcoming. That's something my mother and yours have in common." "Enough." Hippolyta stopped the goddess as she entered with her advisors at her back. "Your father, Strife. Apparently he was more open. Wine would loosen his tongue around me, Queen Hippolyta. What about yours?" "She tells me I am Zeus's daughter, mother, how can this be true?" Hippolyta placed her hands on Diana's shoulders, but her daughter would not meet her eyes. The queen sighed, it seemed it was finally time to reveal the truth. "Diana," she tentatively started. "Before there was you, before your brother even, there was a man. No, there was more than a man, there was a god. The god, there was Zeus." Diana's eyes widened and she turned to look at her mother, but the queen had averted her own eyes, lost in memories. "How did it start?" "Those are details I prefer to keep to myself, though we both agreed to deny the poets what could be the song of the ages. That of the queen of the Amazons and the king of the gods, dancing together." Hippolyta's voice was thick with melancholy. "No, that was a song we sang only to each other. We were glorious. Strength supporting strength, sinews entwined, absolute control given up." She gripped hard on her daughter's shoulders, trying to get her attention as Diana's face shifted through countless emotions. "Our passion left me pregnant, and to guard that secret I left him. He did not follow. Quickly I learned, possessing a god has scant to do with keeping him. I wasn't made of clay," Diana said. "I had to protect you from Hera. She's everything I said she was." Strife interrupted, drawing glares from the others in the dungeons. if she knew. Hermes stepped forward. Diana, you'd be dead. Or worse. Strife finished. Diana shook herself free. My life is a lie. Can it be worse than death? Absolutely. Quipped Strife. We hatched a plan, princess. Dessa spoke up, coming forward to confront her princess. And it kept you safe. We? Diana hissed at the general. This was a conspiracy. Mother, why? Because if Hera learned you were her husband's daughter, she would have murdered you in your crib. Because I had to protect my daughter. Hippolyta reached out and placed her hands on her daughter's cheeks, trying to meet her eyes. Because I love you. Diana just stared down sorrowfully at the ground. You, when I left Paradise Island, do you know why? I ask because you never did. There are some children who need to go away to find their way home. Mother. Diana raised her hand, removing her mother's from her face. Ha. For the first time I can call you that, knowing that your blood is in me. Diana's eyes widened. Brother. She exclaimed. The princess turned to glare at her mother. You speak of this affair as if it lasted centuries. Hippolyta looked away, shame and embarrassment eating away at her. But what of brother? What about Nathaniel? Is he also a son of Zeus? Was it all a lie for him as well? Hippolyta did not try to meet her daughter's eyes. Talk of her first child already moistening her eyes. No, I never lied about him. He was always the son of the death god. Then how? How did you find yourself in uncle's bed when you were supposedly with Zeus? The queen's eyes flashed, as if remembering a horrid detail. Diana, you do not want to know. She said, her voice pleading. No. I don't, Diana agreed. But I must know. Please do not make me tell you. I'm sorry, but I must. I need the truth. Hippolyta chewed at her bottom lip for a few moments before she began. Our dance, it did last centuries, millennium even, but we could not keep it secret forever. Somehow, his brother found out. Hades discovered our affair. With that knowledge he came to me and we formed a bargain. Diana's eyes widened in horror, she almost couldn't believe her mother's words. I would be his for one night, just one, and he would never speak of it. We laid together, as man and woman, but I made him swear that that would be it. He would make no effort to leave me with anything but a rotten memory of that night. And in the end he did. A memory to last a lifetime. No. Diana whispered. Please mother, tell me this isn't true. Hippolyta looked down in shame. That was the union your brother was born from. Slap. The sound carried throughout the dungeons. Diana lowered her hand, her face covered in shadows and her expression stormy. Hippolyta's face was scrunched in pain, very little being from the slap her daughter had just delivered. But perhaps I should have thanked him, for your brother was the only good thing that ever came from that union. Him and later you two are the only truly wonderful things that resulted from my time cavorting with the gods. I would say that I would take it back if I could, but I won't because I wouldn't. If I did I would have never had you. I would have never had my children, who have fostered in me pride the likes of which I could never imagine feeling any other way. Diana turned away, warring within herself over her mother's stories. Hippolyta felt the sting of her daughter's rage, but did not move, even as Diana ran out of the dungeons, followed by everyone else. My daughter, my son, I've lost you both. She said, tears leaking out from her eyes. Secrets never stay buried, Queen Hippolyta. Strife said with a smirk as she leaned on the bars. And they have such sweet consequences. The queen glared as the imprisoned goddess. I do hope you enjoy bars and stale food, Strife. Said the queen, taking some comfort in her power over the one who had revealed her secret. Because you'll be enjoying out hospitality for a long while yet. The goddess of discord smirk fell, turning her face into one of anger and slight fear. Hippolyta, let me out of here. I am a goddess of Olympus, I am the daughter of Zeus. I am. Strife's cries were cut off as Hippolyta closed the doors of the dungeons behind her, racing as fast as she could to catch up with her daughter. Diana raced through the wood, emotional exhaustion preventing her from using her super speed to escape her pursuers. A small mobile phone was clutched tightly in her hand, the only piece of modern equipment she had brought with her for her latest visit to her home. Nathaniel. Please, I need help. That message had been all she had sent, but she knew he'd come. He always had before, he would now. Making her way down to the beach, she ran as fast as she could, ignoring how her mother's voice had joined the calls for her to slow down, to speak to them, to resolve their fight. Diana didn't want to resolve anything, not now, maybe not ever. The ground turned to sand under her feet and she reached the beaches, stopping in front of the ocean to calm her ragged breathing. The others approached, emerging from the forest to watch her. She stared out at the sea, expecting, hoping for him to come. She was not disappointed. The air in front of her warped, distorting and bending until a figure emerged from it. Somewhere behind her Diana could hear her mother gasp, alongside many of the other Amazons. Nathaniel, prince of the Amazons and former heir of Themyscira, stood in front of her, watching her gasp and cry into the sand. He looked at her and his eyes flashed, wandering over the assembled group behind her, as if to find the one who had upset his younger sister. His eyes settled on his mother and for a moment the world seemed to melt away, leaving just the three of them. A mother and her two children, both of whom she had now managed to wound, both figuratively and very literally. "Diana," he said, reaching down and offering her his hand. The princess accepted his aid, allowing herself to be pulled up before throwing her arms around her brother, burying her head in his shoulder. "It was a lie," she gasped. "All a lie. I'm your sister. Your sister by blood and I never knew." Nathaniel stood shocked. He looked over his sister's shoulder at their mother. "You finally told her?" Diana and the assembled Amazons reeled back in shock themselves, save for Hippolyta. "I did, not by choice." Diana glanced between them. "Brother, you knew?" "Not from the beginning. I learned of it after I escaped. I learned a great many things." "Why didn't you tell me?" "To protect you." Diana pushed her brother away, anger taking the place of relief. "You protect me by lying to me?" "Yes." "How could you?" She pushed Nathaniel away, walking down the beachfront. She was followed swiftly by Zola and Hermes, both of whom paused briefly to stare at Nathaniel. The prince himself made to go after her, but was stopped by a hand on his shoulder. His mother pulled him back, shaking her head. "Let her go, she's hurt and angry and we've betrayed her trust. She just needs time." The prince nodded solemnly, for the first time in more than a decade, allowing himself to stand vigil next to his mother as his sister walked off with the mortal and got into the light of the day. Taking perhaps her only possible moment, Hippolyta spoke to her firstborn child. "It's good to see you, my son." Nathaniel glanced at her from the corner of her eye. "I should go." Nathaniel tried to follow after his sister, but was stopped when he felt a pair of arms wrap around his waist and a head rest upon his back. "Please stay." Hippolyta pleaded, not caring for the stares of her advisors or the tension that had entered into her son's body at her touch. Nathaniel didn't want to stay, he wanted to go after Diana, he needed to. He couldn't lose her, not now, not when everything he'd ever dreamed was within his reach. He tried to force his body to obey him, to break his mother's hold and rush after his hurt sister, but he knew that she was right. Both Nathaniel and Hippolyta had hurt her and betrayed her trust in them. She needed time to cool down. And as much as he hated to admit it, it felt good that his mother was hugging him. Perhaps it was some remnant of the man he'd been, or some new part of him that came from his complete merge with Indra, but the prince felt his will crumble as he felt her sadness. "All right." And so the prince let his sister march off with her mortal and her god, while he stood and felt his mother let out tears of loss into his back. "Nathaniel." "Yes, mother." "Happy birthday, my son. What if abused son of Hippolyta Justice League end here and thanks for watching my video till the end.